All right, welcome to this June 10th. Superintendent, will you take the roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Clark?
Here.
Mr. Huey?
Here.
Ms. Larrett?
Here.
Ms. Loftus?
Here.
Mr. Reed?
Here.
All are here, thank you.
All right, we will be going into a closed session until 10 a.m. But before we go into closed session, is there any public comments for closed session items? And I should say we're going into closed session for personnel matters.
No, Mr. Reed.
All right, then we will recess until 10 a.m. Welcome to the June 10th, 2023 special board meeting of the Folsom Cordova Unified School District. Superintendent, will you take the roll, please?
Mr. Evostev? Mr. Clark?
Here.
Mr. Huey?
Here.
Ms. Larrett?
Here.
Ms. Loftus?
Here.
Mr. Reed?
Here.
All are accounted for, thank you.
All right, if all would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Broadcast statement. A broadcast and recording is being made at the direction of the board, and the broadcast may capture images and sounds of those attending the meeting. Folsom Cordova Unified School District Board Policy 1313 promotes mutual respect, civility, and orderly conduct among employees, parents, and the public. We will treat staff, parents, and members of the public with respect and expect the same in return. If any member of the public uses obscenities or communicates in a demanding, loud, insulting, and/or demeaning manner, the board will calmly and politely admonish the person to communicate civilly. Public comments during board meetings are an important component of public engagement and transparency. Members of the public will not be permitted to yield their speaking time to another member of the public. All written comments submitted by 3 p.m. yesterday to the board have been read. Per the Brown Act, the board is not allowed to enter into two-way discussion on any matter not on the agenda. All right, reporting out of closed session. Superintendent?
No action to report out of closed session.
All right, thank you. Item 5, adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion?
I'll move it.
Motion by Board Member Clark. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Board Member Larrett. Superintendent?
Yes, Mr. Evostev?
Aye.
Mr. Clark?
Aye.
Mr. Huey?
Aye.
Ms. Larrett?
Aye.
Ms. Loftus?
Aye.
Mr. Reed?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0, thank you.
All right, that takes us to our board study session. Item 6, Superintendent.
Yes, I want to thank the board for the request to have our governance workshop today and to talk about in preparation for doing formal self-evaluation. But we thought we'd give ourselves a little bit more time to prepare for that because we have 2 new members to our board. And we also talked about every other year contracting with CSBA and the consultant from there to help us through that process. So thank you to the board for that support. And with that, it's my privilege and honor to introduce our consultant from CSBA, Dr. Darrell Camp. Many of you may see him as a familiar face because he has been at many CSBA and AXA conferences. And during the daytime, he's also a superintendent in San Lorenzo. He has been a great mentor and leader on the AXA front as well as California School Board Association. So we're pleased and privileged to have him here with us today. So welcome, Dr. Camp.
Thank you, Dr. Kaligi.
Is his microphone working? I don't see it lighting up.
Is it the green button one?
Is this the green one?
Is that the green button one?
No.
Because there is no. Oh, you got the green button, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, and let me know too. I might be up. I just sometimes prefer to walk around, but I want to make sure that the audio is working also. So let me know if it's not picking up. So thanks again for the invitation to come here and facilitate the governance workshop. Like Dr. Kaligi mentioned, this is my nighttime weekend and just off-time job. But my day job is the superintendent of the San Lorenzo Unified School District. This is the end of my 4th year there. Then I have 7 years of prior superintendent's experience in the Central Valley in a great community called Riverbank, which is right next to Modesto. So about to be the 12th year as a superintendent. And during that time period, I've had the privilege of working with 16 school board members during that time. Not that I keep track, but everyone's memorable. Outside of being a superintendent, though, you might ask, well, how did I get tied into CSBA? CSBA is, like many, I just participate in the workshops. But one thing that I did maybe differently was when I was going through the Master's in Governance program, I made a decision that every time that we had a new school board member that wanted to go through the program, I would go with them. And while I would go with them, I would just sort of hang out in the hallway sometimes, enjoy the drive there and back, talk to the school board member. And sometimes I would complain. And I think I said enough where eventually they said, hey, you want to be a part of the superintendent advisory committee? And I said, sure, and kept, giving feedback. And then all of a sudden I got the phone call that said, do you want to join our team of governance consultants? Normally we hire retired superintendents, but we want to try it, see if it works, right? So I didn't know. I said yes. And before I knew it, I discovered I like doing this work. So I get the benefit of traveling around the state and working with school boards that want to be great governance team on behalf of the students in California. And then besides that, I'm also one of the lead facilitators in their Master's in Governance program, mainly with setting directions, but recently I've done the human resources, policy and judicial review, and collective bargaining. I think setting directions is my favorite, but collective bargaining is a close second. I feel like it's a fascinating process. So that's the work with CSBA. I do present, like you said, at the annual conference. I've done that the last 3 or 4 years in breakout sessions as well. And then I got to meet some of the executive assistants because I've been active in a new program from CSBA called the Executive Assistant Program. So get to see a lot of people on Zoom over the last year or two. Besides CSBA, I've had an opportunity to serve on the board of directors with the Fiscal Crisis and Management Assistance Team, or FICMAT. That gave me a lot of exposure with just different people across the state. And then I've served as president of the California Association of African American Superintendents and Administrators during the pandemic. So from 20 to 22, that was the role. And then AXA most recently. I've been always active in AXA throughout this process. And most recently, just last month, I was elected by the peers or the delegates of AXA, being AXA's next vice president, which is the pipeline to the presidency. So I'm pretty excited about that too. Bottom line is I'm busy, I get around, and I love the work that I do. Love the work that I do. So I'm thrilled to be here just because I believe in public education, and I want to do whatever I can to support, governance teams and just different systems inside the public education space. So I give you a lot of credit too. I was telling some of you on the way in, I've been counting and kind of tracking board meetings. I said, boy, I think you got 4 board meetings in 3 weeks or something like that. That's tremendous. The 1st, the 8th, the 10th, and the 15th, I think, of June. All right, so I just give you a lot of credit, and I also say thank you. I think this is the first district I worked with where all my scheduled interviews happened right according to schedule. Yeah, so kudos. There was no phone tag. Yeah, give yourselves a hand, definitely. So I don't take that for granted. I don't have time to be playing phone tag. So that's tremendous, and it says a lot about you and your commitment. I know you've had a long week, so this meeting is supposed to be a little bit different than the last few meetings that you've had. I got sucked in last night and looked at almost in totality the meeting with the joint meeting that was here in this room. Found it fascinating working with Brianna Garcia and School of Services. She's helping us out, or she's one of the lead people on some work that we're doing with CASA right now, trying to diversify the CBO field, and school services is right at the table with that. So I just give you a lot of credit. But we're trying, this will be a different flow to that, than that meeting and probably your other meetings, because it's really an opportunity to work on governance. And that's what this is about. So obviously no action, just a conversation, getting to know each other a little bit more, and to talk about roles and responsibilities. In fact, I got a little roadmap. Actually, can you bring up the, oh, no, where's Michelle?
Yes.
Can you bring up the slides too?
Yes.
I have a little roadmap right here. There you go. So I have a roadmap for our conversation. We'll do some welcomes like I'm doing now. You've already met each other with the introduction, but we'll get to know each other in a different way. And then, oh yeah, that does work. And then the overview of the meeting objectives and guidelines. Then we're going to shift to getting to know each other more, personal sharing, the working styles, getting to know how, what are your tendencies as a board member? What are your tendencies in terms of the way you process information and the way you like to operate as a board member? And then roles and responsibilities. We're actually going to separate you up into two teams, and one group will look at the roles and responsibilities from the board bylaw perspective, so the 9,000s, and then another group will look at the 2,000s, which gets into the administration, and particularly the superintendent. And then, as was mentioned by Dr. Collegian, we'll have a preview about the board self-evaluation process. Some of you have been through it before. I know you worked with the CSBA consultant just a few years ago, and as we were talking about it, we were saying that if you would have done the board evaluation in June, that would have been a little bit awkward for our two newest board members, right? Yeah, so we said, oh, let's do a preview with the intent of having the board evaluation. I think the plan is to have it latter part of this year. For some reason, December 9th sticks in my mind. I don't know why I randomly remember these dates, but that would be the thought pattern there. So we'll go over what would that look like, what would the evaluation tool look like before we end today. And I want you to know that if we said 2 o'clock, I've never gone past the stated time, so so we won't do that today. You probably want to get out and enjoy the rest of your weekend. So that sounds like a game plan? Yep. Any questions about it? Let's go. All right. So that's our game plan. The first thing I want to do, though, as we get into our game plan is, in your handbook, in your governance handbook, you've identified these governance norms and great norms. And I will say, once again, commend you for having a governance handbook. Not every district in California has a governance handbook. You do. And for CSBA's standpoint, we consider it promising, sometimes best, but promising practices. It gives a greater outline of the way we're going to operate as a governance team. So I commend you for having that. So we're going to just start off this meeting by having you review those governance norms. I want you just to review them and then to ask yourself, which two norms, what's your first priority of a norm that you would like to lift up, and then a second one also. Okay, so what norm would you like to lift up for this particular space that we're in this morning? Oh, gosh. Let's see. Martha, you're doing the deluxe version, huh, Prince? Yeah, page 8, as cited right there, of the governance handbook.
Dr. Camp, when you say lift up, can you explain what that means?
Yeah, so for this particular space, we're going to have the next 4 hours, or now about 3.5 hours together. Which governance norm would you like to focus on today, right? That you think that the group should focus on from your perspective, okay? To just identify two, the first priority and then the second, then we'll at least share those out to the group. Just give me a thumbs up once you've identified two. Just so I know. Okay. Anybody need another minute? Give me 30 seconds. All right, so we're just gonna go around and give you a chance to share. Everybody shares once before anybody shares twice. So just go ahead and we'll start with Miss Rita. Which norm would you like to lift up?
I put focus on the best interest of students.
I'm gonna paraphrase as I write this. It's okay to have repeats too. I'll just star those. I'll say the best interest of students. That's the paraphrasing. All right. Ms. Karen?
Act by building on the thoughts and ideas of fellow governance team members.
Okay. Oh, it's under
Sorry,
the
the
building
longest
block. Right. So the building on ideas, right? On thoughts and ideas. Okay, next.
Focus on the best interests of our students.
Number one. Okay, next one.
Disagree agreeably.
Disagree. Where's that? Agreeably. That's sometimes a very hard one. Okay.
Yeah, agreeably was a word. Oh gosh, they're all so good. I'm gonna go with, be open to new ideas.
Open to new ideas. All right.
Be willing to compromise.
Willing to compromise. Okay. All right, next.
Hear each member's ideas and voice.
Encourage members' ideas and voice. Oh.
Here, I think
Oh,
it says
peers.
here,
Okay. Where's that?
here. The third one down.
Third one. Oh, so hear each member's ideas and voice. Okay. Hear. Okay. Ideas and voice. And let's go around the second time.
I have disagree agreeably as well.
Yeah, disagree agreeably. Okay. Okay, next.
Commit to open communication, honesty, and transparency.
Commit to, oh, that third from the bottom?
Yep.
Okay, next one?
Mine was commit to open communication, honesty, and transparency as well.
Oh, ditto. Okay, great. All right. Next one?
Hear each member's ideas and voice.
And that was, all right. There we go. Okay.
Be willing to compromise.
Willing to compromise.
Value each member's point of view.
Value members' point of view. All right.
And be open to new ideas.
Be open to new ideas. That was one of the, oh yeah, right here. All right, so just kind of notice what you've said so far. Where we, oops, sorry. keep forgetting about this thing. So notice or just kind of observe what you've put so far and what the group may be thinking in terms of, obviously today. I'm going to make an assumption that whichever norm was identified, you probably have a scenario, a situation that occurred in the past that causes you to uplift those particular norms, right, for today, right? So even though we're just talking about today, it looks like a few of these norms have some stars next to them. That means at least we got 2 people that said, hey, I really want to focus on that. So I might just want to think about that in the future. Like, what might that look like? What might it sound like? Where might we have fallen short in previous situations as an acknowledgement moving forward, right? So we won't get into any particular situation today. And you've had some, I'm sure, some great conversations in recent board meetings, especially for our new board members. Gosh, it's been 6 months now, right? I won't ask you now if it's been all you expected it to be sitting on the board. Well, sometimes people get on the board and they get exposed to the breadth of issues and areas of a school district, and it sometimes can be overwhelming, and that's okay. That's okay. In my humble opinion, in fact, not just mine, I had a board member that completed a master's in governance once, and I asked her, and she was about in year number 6 as a member of the board of trustees at that time, and I asked her, if you had to do anything again, what would you do differently? And she said, I would have completed master's in governance earlier. And that's her way of acknowledging I think when she got on the board, she saw the board as a parent. She was a PTA parent and, just went to the board, and all of a sudden you get exposed to all these other issues and you quickly realize that being on the board is or education is very complex. It's very complex, and we have all these systems that are operating in educational spaces, and within all these systems, they're tied together. They're linked. So if you make a decision here, that's going to impact all these other systems, and now you're trying to figure out what's the best decision to make, or where might my vote go in terms of making the decision. And it's hard, especially those first years, because you may not see the interlocking parts. All that's to say is this: you have your experts over here, you have your expert that you hire as a superintendent, and you all have your own experience. And sometimes it's helpful to hear all this, acknowledging your own experience, but also acknowledging you have the experts that work on this, whatever they're the expert in, they're probably putting in, it's not 40, it's probably closer to 55 to 65 hours a week on whatever their issue is. And there's no way that you can duplicate that, right? That's their job. They're putting in 60 hours a week. And if you tried to become an expert in everything, right, the SELPA, the emerging bilingual, it's just not enough hours in a day. It's a mathematics issue, right? It doesn't matter how smart you are, it's a mathematics issue that it's hard to match. So with that, with CSBA, we think it's really important to acknowledge the experts, recognize you pay the experts a lot too for their expertise, and your experiences are valued. One of the most common issues that happen with boards, though, is not taking the time to acknowledge each other's experiences. You're all here because whatever led you to this room today, in fact, I will guarantee that everybody that's in this room today is in this room through a different journey. Everybody took a different journey. Don't know what your journey is, but everybody took a different journey to be here. So we're gonna explore part of that journey, okay? So this, I don't have a slide for this, you don't need it. In your packet, can I borrow your folder? So everyone has a folder like this. Sorry. Everybody has a folder, and you see on the left side of the folder are some CSBA resource materials. the professional governance standards, which I know there's some cross-links between this and your handbook, the Masters in Governance program, a sample governance calendar, and then evaluations. That's on the left side, but we're going to be focusing right now on the right side. So on the right side, you have a welcome sheet that says, let's get acquainted. Oh, thank you. Oh, nice. Let's get acquainted. And on the let's get acquainted, we're going to take some time to do some reflection and sharing. So you can see from the prompt, there's actually 2 prompts on this sheet. It says, let's get acquainted on this sheet. Let's get acquainted. And you're going to have an opportunity to share something about yourself and to hear something from the people that are at this table. So obviously your name. The first prompt, though, the only prompt is actually on this side is think about something that happened earlier in life that has impacted you and the person you are today. So think about something that happened earlier in life that has impacted the person you are today, your journey, if you will. This could be a single moment or a period of time in your life, okay? So think about it, write down some notes, because everybody's going to have a chance to share. And then, for you overachievers, after you write down some notes, just flip it on the back and just do some reflection. Think about March 2020. Nothing ever happened then. But since March 2020, how has life changed for you? Kind of think about it. In this very short little snapshot of 3 years, what has changed for you? Okay? So I'm going to be quiet for a moment, let you do some reflection, and then I'll share out first as a way of modeling. Oh, all right. So we're going to take volunteer. Who would like to go first? Just to put this in context, though, some people, I grew up a wannabe athlete, I call myself, and I played baseball over at Skyline High School in Oakland, and I wasn't into the touchy-feely thing. But then as a superintendent, and particularly working with governance teams, but really any team I work with, though, I think I underestimated this idea of getting in touch with who you are and the team. I underestimated it. I thought you just go out there, you do your job, and it'll all work out. Sometimes it does, but sometimes, though, the chemistry part of it helps sometimes to do the job more effectively. For all you Warrior fans out there, this is King Zone, I realize that. Okay, just to put that out there. But one of the things as the Warriors are debriefing their season this year, almost to every team member that I've heard when I listen to podcasts and things like that, they say, yeah, our chemistry was really disrupted at the start of the year. At the Draymond situation, right, and Jordan Poole. They said that lingered with them throughout the year. People even were connecting it to their horrible road record, because the road, you're a team at that point. You don't go off to your separate places like you do at home. On the road, you're all together, hotels, eating, traveling, buses, and all that. And I compare that to the governance team, saying that you can get the job done. Wards got the job done. I did pretty well. Second round, right? But something was missing. Make no mistake about it. Something was missing. And at CSBA, we encourage governance teams to think about how do you get to be a strong governance team. And one way is get to know yourself, and that's what we're doing right now. We're giving you some reflection time, and it's a gift. And everybody takes the time to reflect. And right along with that self-reflection time we got going on right now, we're going to get to know each other a little bit better, right? Taking the time just to know each other. And sometimes you can understand the rationale behind the decisions after you know each other better, which oftentimes will enhance and is connected to some of these ideas right here, right? So we'll connect these as we go along after we share out for just a little bit. So I'm going to sit down, and I don't have a talking piece or any of that. And If I start, if I start messing with my ear like that, that means, hey, you might want to start, getting toward the end of the thought, okay? That's just our signal. But I don't want to cut off anybody, though. I just want you to recognize monitor your time, you're sharing. So the first prompt was something that impacted you, either an event or a series of events that impacts who you are. So here's my modeling. Like I mentioned before, a wannabe athlete, played sports in youth programs in high school. Actually, the high school team I played on was pretty good. We were number 9 in the state one year and 10 in the state another year. That means we had some really good players, not me. But I had an opportunity to start at second base over at Candlestick Park, for those of you that remember Candlestick Park. And I think that baseball experience growing up has a lot to do with the person I'm today. On those baseball teams, I wasn't the rah-rah type of a guy. I just kind of went out there and did my job. But there were a couple of pivotal moments that I really think define kind of the way I see things today. One was my brother was on an opposing youth baseball team once, and he was a catcher. And I was on third base once with, I think, 1 out, and my job was to score. And I just remember a ground ball that went to the third base person, and I took off. I thought I could make it. Well, the ball beat me to home plate. My brother was the catcher on the other team, and I distinctly remember I'm going to score, and nothing was going to stop me. And according to my brother, by the way, had me by about 60 pounds and probably 5 inches. I scored. My brother's face was bloody at the end, but that was what I was taught to do. You run through a wall in order to get the job done. And it's this fierce competitiveness that's in me. I was quiet, but that's the part of me. The other situation I just want to lift up that's connected was, I remember somebody quit on us in the middle of the season on my high school baseball team. And then the person wanted back. And the coach did something differently. He stood out in center field, and we all had to run out to center field to give him our vote on whether or not we should allow the person to return to the team. He wanted to know everybody's opinion. And I just remember running out there and saying, no way. No, once you quit on me, that was it. And I think about my attitude towards certain things right now, and I think it follows. I don't like quitting. It's like I'm gonna go full out. I'm gonna score at all costs. I'll do it quietly, and don't quit on me. Once you're in, you're in. I don't hold it against you if you leave, but don't try to come back after you've left. I wish you all the luck, but no, that's it. So those situations growing up as a baseball player in Oakland youth baseball programs in high school influenced the way I am today. I'm complete. Who would like to go and share their?
I guess I can go first. I think what's been impactful in my life was, I think I was probably one of the lucky ones in the area that I grew up in to have a 2-parent household. I mean, I had a mother and father that put my brother and I through various youth programs, got us involved in the community. I remember my time, my dad just put us in a car and he took us feeding the homeless, and it kind of gave me a sense of giving back. But like I said, I was fortunate enough to have a mom and dad, but then later on in life, I became a single dad. And it was like, okay, I don't have that partner with me to help me raise my daughter. But, the values that my parents taught me, I kind of, taught my daughter, Christina, and did the same things with her, got her involved in Interact through Rotary and just to give back. So I think that's impacted me and made me the way that I am now. I was blessed to work for the city of Stockton and in an underserved community where these kids didn't have two-parent households. Either the, dad was in jail or the mom was, maybe had drug issues. But I seen firsthand, the value of giving back and kind of helping those kids out and trying to relate to them as a single dad at the time, to kind of mentor them. And I think doing that now, I kind of moved on in my job, but, when I first started, I became a mentor. I wanted to give back. So it's kind of impacted me in a way. And then also another thing was working with the disabled population, because I had an opportunity to work with the company Disabled Sports to help these kids with adaptive sports, whether it was golf or track or whatever. So that was another thing that impacted my life. And now I have more of a passion for the disabled population. And I always tell them, if you can do this, you can do anything. And I always drive that home with them. So that's my story.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And what I didn't say, if something that someone says resonates, just jot it down, because we'll have a chance to interact a little bit more after everybody shares. If you want to ask follow-up questions and all that, like when Trustee Clark said disabled, okay, it helped me to connect the dot. So now I flash back to 2 days ago when he asked about the SELPA and the feasibility study meeting, right? I said, oh, okay, that makes sense. That's the connection point, right? That's why there's a particular interest in that area, giving back disabled, some of our most needy students. How are we serving them? All right, who'd like to go next?
I can go next. My name's Kara, and I wrote about navigating co-parenting with my ex-husband for my oldest daughter, and having to learn how to separate what I can control and what I can't control, and focusing on the things that I can control and letting go of the things that I cannot. And so knowing that I can control my own behaviors, my own actions, but cannot control that of others. So it's something that's took a long time for me to navigate through, but also that allows me to separate those things. So.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I'll be happy to go next. Thanks, Kara, for sharing. Well, I think specifically of a time period, more so than a specific incident. And I would say for me, it's about the age of 9 to 13. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I'll be happy to share with anybody if they are curious offline. During that time period, though, I went through a lot of transitions, including divorces and moves, that had a pretty tremendous impact on my life. I would say those are pretty formational years. I think it has a lot to do with why I've attempted several times to stop working with students and just find myself continuing to work with students, particularly in that middle school age range. I think probably has a lot to do with why I think throughout my career been looking to work in populations that are vulnerable, if not because of their circumstances, just because of their internal circumstance and their age and development. So, I mean, I don't know why this came to my mind not long ago, actually. I just thought of it. It maybe sums up a little bit of that experience for me. I remember we moved I guess it was about a couple days before my 13th birthday to a town, and I hadn't started school yet. I was off for 1 week before I started and celebrated my birthday with, I literally didn't know anybody, was completely new to the area, and yeah, it's just a memory that sticks with me more so for kind of what it emotes more so than the what was actually happening during that time. But I do think that's, it took me a long time to start to heal from that, understand it. I think I have done a decent job of that. And like I said, it probably is why I've chosen to be a therapist, probably why I'm here today, and why I'm doing the work that I do.
So for me, it's probably more a whole life experience. I'm a third generation family business. And so my grandfather started the business in the early 70s, and just that experience of going through that with your family and having to consistently reinvent yourself to what is kind of needed at the time in the industry and things like that. And these interpersonal relationships that you have working with family members, because I've worked with aunts and uncles and cousins and brothers and sisters and parents, and you will fight it out, you will slug it out, and also come together in the end, knowing that collectively you need each other in order to be able to survive, because you're all so codependent upon each other. And so I think I process things a lot like that, of like, you know, we might disagree, but in the end, it's going to take us all collectively to get to that finish line, and that we can't do it independently of each other. And so, but for me, sometimes it's that struggle with those personalities and stuff like that to get to an understanding, even with some of my own siblings, of having to grow up together, not only in the same household, you know, personally, but in a household that's working together, you know, so you spend every holiday, every, you know, weekend, every waking minute with each other. And, but getting to that point with them where you understand where they're coming from, to understand really how they work and how you can like put some things, personal things aside to be able to like move forward together for the collective good. So.
Thank you.
I'm trying to decide if I want to talk about this one issue or not. This is part of the reason why I wish these meetings weren't broadcast. Yeah. But actually, Tim might have shown me a way that I can talk about a topic without getting into much detail. So I'm going to switch to I guess, a somewhat comparable story between second and third grade. We moved, and you know, I had grown up in a small community in Pennsylvania up until second grade. I was a very outgoing and student, or not student, excuse me, just outgoing, I should say. Full of energy. I don't think my parents knew how to contain me. Million questions. I always had questions for everything, including the famous one, what's the moon made out of, right? But everything was a question for me. And by the way, I was not a good student either. I was a horrible student. We moved to another community, and I immediately became very, I guess, isolated. I realized that I was actually a fairly shy person, actually a very shy person. I found it very difficult to find connections with new people, because I just didn't know anybody. And I would say the rest of my I guess 3rd through 12th grade, I was a very quiet person, kept to myself. You know, I had a few friends, but you know, I wasn't the super outgoing person. And I think intermixed with that, there was my parents divorced or started a very long divorce. It didn't actually finish until I was in college. But I think I found it was education that I kind of focused in on. It was something that I could control. So, my goal was to become as good of a student as I possibly could. It was probably the one area that I wasn't shy was in class. I was the kid who always raised his hand, volunteered the answer. A lot of other kids probably didn't appreciate that, so anyway, that's in a very high level description. I'll leave it at that.
Appreciate it.
Did you want to go?
All right, this is a little intimidating. So I chose, my parents named me Ria because they thought that that would be an easy name for Americans to pronounce when they immigrated here. And I think that's kind of like a metaphor for me about this pressure I felt to exist for the comfortability and ease of other people and not be true to myself. And I think as I get older, I've just learned a lot about, apart from being a straight A student, a respectful daughter, and just agreeable as a person, that there's room for me to take up space and use my voice as it's true to me. And I think as I found my own voice, I've become really passionate about encouraging other marginalized students to do the same, and just making space for ourselves. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ria. I reflect back to my childhood, and I was the only girl. I grew up with 3 brothers, and in a 2-parent household. And I was, all 4 of us were treated, pretty much equitably with experiences that my parents exposed us to. We had very humble beginnings. So, our playground were the grapevines, and we played in the mud and in the dirt and did all those things. However, I put pressure on myself because I thought, as the only daughter, I needed to be perfect. And that sense of perfection, I didn't sense it from my parents, but it was an internal expectation on myself. And I remember the first time I experienced a failure, and it was in elementary school, and it was just a little thing. I don't need to go into the details. How my parents lifted me up after that and encouraged me to go on. And I call it failing forward, because each experience I had of failure, whether it was elementary, middle, high school, college, or adult life, I remember just that encouragement from my parents, to keep trying. It's okay. You don't have to be perfect. And I think that, that whole life philosophy has stuck with me to a point where I can tell myself I don't have to be perfect, even in my role that I'm in now, or as a wife, a mother, a grandmother. But I have very high expectations. But it's taught me I can give grace to not only myself, but those around me as well. So that's kind of what I've learned from those experiences over many, many years of my life.
Those are powerful stories, and I hear what you're saying. It's awkward with this, right?
I probably would have shared more if it wasn't being recorded.
Right. Yeah, and I have to say I guess most workshops that I do is they usually aren't recorded, and you do get, well, my humble opinion, you do get a different level of, I would say, authenticity, but not transparency, of sharing, vulnerability. We can, but it's hard to do with this. However, I will say, nothing, I mentioned, as long as you're complying with the Brown Act, it doesn't say you have to be recorded, right? Many boards, they decide if they're doing something like this, they won't record it, just so you can be a little bit more vulnerable and not have to worry about it going on the evening news or something like that, right? That possibility may exist, so I can respect that. And I will say also, sometimes when you're getting together and you don't want to violate Brown Act, but one of the benefits of going to those learning experiences together is sometimes it's a different setting, right, where you're just learning and then you're talking about life circumstances while you're learning. Just so I make sure I know who, it wasn't, I'm not saying just CSBA, because there are other learning forums, right? But clearly the annual conference is something that many people feel valuable. Who went last year? Just so I know. Yeah, I know it was pretty powerful. Not only do you get opportunity to be vulnerable with each other, but you get to meet other people from around that may have a better idea about what it's like to serve as a trustee, right? That's an odd experience. But any follow-up among each other that you kind of want to follow up on? Like, for me, it was like hearing Ria's story was, oh, that informs who she is. So in hearing about the parents giving you a name for other people to be comfortable. And that kind of stuck with you. It's like my role is to make sure other people are comfortable. Now it sounds like you've gone through a transition to say, if I'm reading it correctly, I'm going to use my voice even if it makes people uncomfortable. That's what you're saying? Yeah. And you want to set up different forums so other people can be encouraged to do the same. Okay. Yeah.
If I can echo that, I mean, with Rhea, I mean, I don't know, when she found her voice, she really found her voice. And I know there were a few times when her and I would talk before she even became a student board member, but she's always had this voice. And honestly, Rhea, I appreciate you and I know sometimes you and I had bantered back and forth on some things, but I will really tell you, I appreciate you and the young lady that you have become and the voice that you have now. And my only thing is to encourage you to continue to use your voice. I mean, because many of us, and I can probably tell you, being on this board, even though I was elected in 2016, I really didn't find my voice until about 2019, 2020, especially on this board. But she has a jump start, and like I said, I encourage you to continue to use it because it's going to get you places. So,
my thoughts on that too is I used to teach social science, and so this was something that I was always passionate about teaching my students, is to use their voice and find their voice. And watching Rhea and Rocio use their voice at such a young age is incredible. It took me 40 years to find mine. And so seeing it and knowing that you are both strong enough to move forward through life and not let the things that try to block you from using your voice. I think that your time as a board member probably will help that, because lots of barriers come up. But it's something, to me, watching you two up there, like, gives hope in the future. That's my passion in teaching and educating students to use their voice. And so watching you guys do it, it gives me hope. And then also I would say, I just jotted down some notes. So Chris, when you talked about working with students with disabilities, my niece went through Folsom Cordova in special ed. So it's something that I also hold very passionate, very close. When I was an administrator, worked with that same population. So something that I always want to keep an eye out for, because it's often, unfortunately, something that's put to the side of schools, put to the side of thoughts, and something that should be much more centrally focused. And then Dr. Cliggian, I'm also one of brothers. So when you were speaking to that, it was something that I never felt my parents put that pressure. And to this day, I still put that pressure of being the only daughter and being the responsible one and being that person that has to kind of step up in a way that is, I don't think it was even not expected of my brothers. I just thought that it was, so.
Other follow-ups?
It sticks out to me just collectively that it's a lot of stories of resilience, or failing forward, maybe be the better way to put it. All of us kind of have these moments that this pain or this thing we went through has really informed how we're doing really wonderful things today. So it's good to hear that and know, like, this is a commonality, at least around this table, that we've been able to take those things and make something really wonderful out of them.
One thing that I heard too was there were a few stories about transitions that happen when you're younger and how that impacts you. And for me as a dad that has two sons, and we've gone through different moves. I lived in the Bay Area, I lived in Elk Grove, near Modesto, and now, I work closer to the Bay, I'll say. And I always think about how those moves may have impacted my sons, particularly my younger son. It's that idea of I got friends, and then dad moves, right? Family moves. And I wonder how that might have impacted, how things might have been differently for my kids if I would have just hunkered down and said, okay, this is it for a while. I'll never get the answer, but it is a wondering for me. I would say on the flip side, how it's connected to my work is when I was a high school principal, I really thought about that a lot. We had a transit population when I was a high school principal. And so we eventually landed on something and said, well, what do we do to help students transition into the school when they come in? Because our enrollment was staying the same, but teachers used to say, we always have students coming and going, coming and going, coming and going. I'm like, our enrollment's the same. And then we really looked into it, and I looked at the enrollment pattern for 1 month, and literally it was like 30 out, 32 in, right? I said, oh, okay, this is what they're saying, right? So we built in a orientation program and we just ran orientations by month. New kids come in, we call them all together by month, and we tried to say, introduction, this is who I am, these are your support services, and we kind of tried to build our system for people coming in and out to make sure they felt welcoming. I thought. Any other? Just
I heard a common theme, I think, from most stories that were shared of realizing those things in our life that we can control and, the ability to overcome some of those difficulties and those things that are out of our control. And I think Kara said it too explicitly in your comments. But I think all of us had a story to share where we overcame something and realized those things, that were necessary, such as working with your family. But, some things are out of your control, but you still know that you need to continue forward. And I think it's that realization and then how you're going to show up in that space and that realization.
Yeah, a lot you can't control, huh? Learning how to release. I think they called that the serenity prayer, right? The wisdom to know the difference between the two. That's the last one, right? What you can control, what you can't, and the wisdom to know the difference between the two. Yeah. Does it, when anybody want to react to other stories too? So family business for a number of years, right? And you said third generation. So you sounds like the sports team. You fight, but you're trying to come up with a better product at the end, right?
Yeah, so my grandfather actually, he invented the two-prong fork puller, and he was in the aerospace industry. So we started out in wineries, working with, actually explicitly with Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's was his first opening in Los Angeles, and he was getting into the fine foods industry. And so we were working with them explicitly, and we saw our fork puller business reinvented to promotional products, reinvented to gifting, and so having to go through these transitions, have had separations with family members who started their own companies, so just going through these transitions all the time, and consistently always trying to be at the top of your profession and striving for that and having to do that collectively sometimes can be a struggle, because as you're going through these transitions, there's this dynamic where you have some family members that think you should go one way and others that think you should go another way, and having to kind of come to that collective agreement of how do you move forward together.
Is it easier or harder with family?
Oh, I think it's definitely harder because you have all these extra interpersonal dynamics.
Yeah.
With an employee-employer relationship, you can kind of table that and go home and not deal with that. But if you've had family strife and you've got to go into the Christmas holidays, that can be challenging,
Yeah, if you're arguing or fighting over the business, and yet you're breaking bread together holidays, or it's not like you can compartmentalize that. That makes
And definitely as we've gotten older and we've transitioned and move out of kind of your 20s and learn how to communicate better, those strifes have definitely diminished. So, but it's definitely a learning process of how you communicate is really the kind of key to success.
I have a sort of a follow-up question to the group. Is it easier to communicate in conflict with somebody you don't have a relationship with, or you do? For me, I recognize that superintendent, we're used to being criticized, plenty of opportunities to be criticized, and we get a lot of feedback from a lot of people. But the people that I work most closely around, my cabinet team, I try to establish an environment where they can criticize me, but it's hard because, I have positional authority. The person that gives me the most critical feedback, and it's hard sometimes, but I appreciate it. It's my wife. I I know she's giving me feedback for the sake. Ultimately, I think she loves me, she cares about me, and wants to see what's best. So when she gives me critical feedback, it's a little easier to take. Sometimes hard to take, but it's easier to take because we at least have a relationship, right? Anybody else just goes through those reflections, just working with people?
I personally think it's more difficult to to take or have those hard conversations with people that you work more closely with, just because you're trying to figure out how do you communicate without damaging a relationship. Mm-hmm. And that sometimes can be the challenge of how do you communicate in like the proper manner and be very specific about what it is and try to take the personal attack out of it. And you also can't control how the other person's going to perceive that. And I think that's the element when you're talking about things you can control, things you can't control, you can't necessarily control how the other person's going to take that criticism. And that's the hard part of walking that fine line of trying to like work through an issue in a positive manner without coming across as being personally attacking.
Yeah. And any other thoughts?
Well, I think to piggyback on that, while it might be harder if you've developed a relationship and you know communication styles and you put in that effort and energy into learning and knowing communication styles, you might be able to at least make a guess at how somebody's going to respond based on their communication style, and then also determine the best way to communicate maybe something hard to that person. But without knowing somebody or without knowing how somebody communicates, whether that's verbally, non-verbally, or how they'll respond, it's difficult to have difficult conversations.
Yeah, you're sort of guessing, but the more you get to know the person, you can morph maybe the same message, but how you say it, and sometimes just as important as how you say it is when you say it, right? Like, it's like that person, no, don't talk to them after a board meeting. No, that's not the good time, right? This is going to have to take some different area or the when and the how is important, right?
Don't talk to me before I have coffee. But no, it's knowing that person, and it makes a big difference in how you communicate.
Even when you know the person, you still mess up sometimes, right? Gosh, I hope no one ever listened to this recording. But I was in one situation where I'm trying to be a good dad and a superintendent, right? So I decided to coach my son's AAU team, basketball team. I had some coaching background and all that. So one time we just had a hard-fought game. And, after you have the game, you meet with the team, right? So we go off, and I'm meeting with the team, and I'm into it. Now, I have to warn you, when I'm coaching, remember the mild-mannered person that you see in front of you today? I go into a different mindset when I'm coaching. It's literally a different person. I'm just all in, and it's a different level of intensity. That the baseball me comes out, and it's very focused. I love coaching because I don't even think about the superintendency during those hours. I don't have enough brain power left. So I'm with my team there, and I'm getting on them about something we did or didn't do during the game, and I'm intense. My wife comes in and says something, and I snap. I snap. It wasn't until, 15, 20 minutes later, I said, oh, my response was highly inappropriate. But then I had to talk to her and say, look, when you came into this space, this is my mindset. You don't know this part of me. But so we had a conversation, and at least I could say, just please, when I'm in this space, I really do need some separation. And she didn't even say anything. I can't remember what she said, right? It's one of those things. We got 25 years in. You don't remember what you argued about at this point. But I just remember the mindset. And what that told me was just like you're saying. There's probably a time and a place and how you say something are all important when you're trying to, get things accomplished as a team. Yeah. Any others, though?
It makes me think, my wife and I, a week and a half ago celebrated 20 years, and I've been thinking, maybe we're slow learners, but I think it probably took us 13 or 14 years before we really started to understand anything about each other, to the point where where we could respond to each other how we're talking right now. So it is this reminder that for me, that's why it's always been harder with people I'm more intimate with. That's not why, but it's been harder because the stakes seem higher to me. I feel like I could pretty quickly understand communication styles with somebody, but we're all obviously so much more than just, a Myers-Briggs test or anything like that, and it took over a decade for the person I'm closest with for us to really start to understand how each other think and operate. It asks a lot of people to be able to do that in a short amount of time. I think when everybody's paying attention, it works really well. But it takes a lot of effort.
It does. And to kind of wrap up this part, but also to bring it back home and saying, you just look among the people that are here. Anybody want to make a prediction or remember from their master's in governance how many different relationships are formed here? I don't even remember. I don't need a number, but just think about it. Like that's you, and then that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You're just talking about Rhea alone. That's like 6 different relationships. Oh, you know what? I'm going to say 7 because the most important relationship in that. Huh? Yeah, it is. I heard some theologians say, the person that you talk to more than anybody else is yourself, right? Right? So you got to work out that relationship, and the stronger you are working out that relationship and finding your voice, it makes you ideally a better communicator with the other relationships that you do have. So taking the time out is critical.
I totally agree with that because there are some times when I need to get into myself, and my wife will always get on me. It's like, I notice sometimes you will take the freeway when you want to get home quickly, and I tell her the reason why is because I don't have anything on my mind. But if I have something on my mind, I'll take the back roads all day just so I can kind of tune into myself and kind of talk to myself about how the day went. So, I mean, that's just, and my wife understands that of me, and she just says, okay, I know you need your downtime. Or if I come home and I go straight to my office at home, it's like, okay, I know you don't want to be bothered. You need to get into yourself and do your self-care mentally.
You need your time, huh? Yep. Yep. I guess my wife, when she says, hey, don't you want to go take a walk? That's a hint, right?
You need to leave.
Yeah, probably. This is so good. Can't we agree, right? That's good. All right. Hey, did anybody get into the secondary prompt? Anything that's changed major since 2020, March of 2020? For me,
I did.
Oh, yeah, let's share.
For me, I think at that time I was board president, and at that time it was COVID. I mentioned about finding my voice, but also it really, because they kind of warn you when you get into this that you need to develop tough skin. I developed it at that time because some of the meetings weren't too pleasant. Some of the things that happened after the meeting, like emails and phone calls that I get, weren't too pleasant. But I think what had really changed for me is that, hey, you know what? I got to develop some tough skin. I got to deal and not get totally wrapped up into what they're saying. It's like, okay, you said that. I got it. It's time to move on.
Yeah. I think for me, and I've been at it for about 30 years, about 30 in education. The last 2 or 3 years we went through were the most difficult years, and I've heard for people that have got more experience than I do, that was different. And some of you came on board, obviously just came on board in 23 on the board, right? No, 22, November 22 or December 22. You came on board when? In 20. So you're a pandemic board member that started there, right? Yeah. Anybody that came on during that time period, just recognize you're different. You got brought into a different situation that wasn't good for these interpersonal relationships. You know, at CSBA, we say one of the most important things you do when you get new trustees is to provide an orientation and to take the time to welcome the new team member. But during the pandemic, you know, and part of that meant you have one-on-one conversations, you know, a lot. But during the pandemic, what was discouraged? One-on-one conversations. And people were told, don't get together, right? And a lot of your interactions were probably on that box as a board. Yeah, that's not ideal relationship building circumstances. I'll say that. So you came in at a different time, and I'm going to say, in my humble opinion, you came in at a disadvantage. Even the things like CSBA, where sometimes teams are forming, getting to know each other. I think CSBA had 1 year where it went total virtual. That was the 21 year went total virtual. And you don't have those random interactions in the hallway or over dinner and things like that. It was, you know, the content might have been the same, but those other interactions didn't happen. And then I think the next year for 22 CSBA, I think they had those lanyards, right? If you're okay with a hug, wear a green one, a yellow one, if red, and red if you're not okay with any touching at all. It's like, yeah. And I remember asking them, well, can I flip it depending on who's in front of me? But never mind, but those weren't ideal circumstances. So I just say kudos to you for surviving it. And, you know, now that I won't say back to normal, because we'll never be back to normal. This is our new norm. And the norm wasn't good enough for a lot of people, so we don't want to necessarily go back to norm. But we are in a situation where it might be a great opportunity to reset relationships. Just might be. You know, just recognize, okay, it was tense, and it might be a great time to reset some of these relationships because you can meet again. Anybody else have big things that changed after March of 2020?
For me, I actually left working for the school district at 2021. So I worked for Folsom, Cordova.
In 2021, and came back in 22 to have a board member.
So when I left, I said I was coming back. But it was one of those, again, kind of a growth experience for me. I was getting my master's in education during 2020. And so there was a lot of changes in my life where we were bringing things forward and I was facing barriers, and it was, again, one of those, can I control it? Can I not control it? And I could control my choices in terms of that. And so I just kept running into things where I felt like we could have been doing better for kids, despite the very difficult time that it was. And so it was a choice I made to leave my career path. I was a teacher, I was an administrator, I worked at the district office. I formed great relationships in the district. And so for me, I left all of that and I opened my own business, which was very scary for everybody, probably my husband the most. But I thrive on the conversations and relationships that have developed since then, because of being willing to step out of that box and do something different, and which also allowed me to come back into this role. So,
Yeah. What's the new business?
it's an enrichment learning center.
So it's still in the education
Yeah.
space, right?
Yep.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, you triggered another thought that's going to come back in a moment. Oh, you made a comment. I thought we could do better for kids, and I put that connected to that first bullet, focus on the best interests of students. Mm-hmm. That period of time, once again, there were a lot of opinions about what's in the best interest of students, right? and it was something that was personal at a different level than most other conversations that we've had. Many, polarizations that were happening, playing out all over the nations and in different communities. Even in extremely conservative communities, It was a contentious conversation because you had the state that was in the guidelines that kept changing weekly. And people were making decisions about kids, right, and students in what they saw in the best interest. But local, and even I'm in the Bay Area, so a totally different conversation, but make no mistake about it, all opinions were represented no matter what decision you're making, right, about something that was highly personal, kids. And I don't know if you saw the video. There was the one parent that said, gosh, my kid's teacher lied to me. I used to have a lot of respect for my kid's teacher, a lot of respect, but they lied to me. They told me my kid was a pleasure to have in class. That was a parent, like, get that kid back in school as soon as possible. This is a tough role, right, of having, imagine one student at home, and then if you have multiple kids and a smaller space for some, every house wasn't created the same, right? And everybody didn't have their own office and all that. Those are personal. And yet here you are on the school board tasked with making the decision in you got Placer County here, and El Dorado is different than Sacramento and all that. That's difficult. That's just highly difficult. So I just say, whatever decision you made them, give yourself a break. It was contentious, and now you got to get back to, okay, well, what are the other best interests of kids? And you all have different opinions. And why do you have different opinions? Because you all have different experiences, backgrounds, interests, beliefs. Everybody's different. So somehow you got to put it together, right? And decide, obviously via a vote, what's in the best interest from this school board. Recognizing you won't agree, it's impossible. It's just impossible. But we say that you got a better shot if you know how each other are coming from. In your handbook, you said something about if you're the minority vote. I think it says no, but basically if you're the minority vote, whatever it is, that after the vote, you're going to basically support whatever the decision of the board is. And that's a difficult one. That is, because that's in that area of disagreeing in a way that's, what's the word, agreeably? Or the non-word, right. That's hard. That is really hard. So I don't want to minimize that happens. Yeah. Last year, about 2020, for me, my mom died last year.
I would just say that, I mean, it really hasn't been easy since March of 2020. When we made the decision on March 13th, I think it was.
Friday the 13th.
Yeah, I mean, it was conveyed to us that it was a 2-week break and that 2-week break became a year and a half kind of a nightmare, quite frankly. And being on the school board in the spring of 2020 and in the fall of 2021, I mean, the emails that the board members got in the spring of 2020 and the fall of 2020, I mean, they were not pleasant emails. And you had to understand that they were coming from parents that were very frustrated. And I got it because I was one of those frustrated parents as well. But we got it from the right, we got it from the left, the political extremes on both sides. I at one point, I think I remember saying to my wife, I don't think there's anything that I could do to make anybody happy, because nobody was happy. And I mean, I guess to the credit of this school board is, we did take the tactic of keeping focused on the goal and staying in the center and ignoring the extremes on both sides. I think the goal was really not to get on television, and we didn't. We didn't do anything that was, crazy on one side or crazy on the other to try to appease the voices that we were getting from both sides, and just kept our heads down and did what we needed to do. I mean, I think that year, Chris, I think we had 36 meetings, and most of those, I mean, one of those, and we weren't here. We were, I actually drove to my office so I could have a quiet space. And I was frequently, which is in Sacramento, and I was frequently there till after midnight with those meetings that we had. And, I mean, obviously, the goal was to get the schools reopened as soon as we could. And I am proud to say that, FCUSD was the first district in Sacramento County to get the schools reopened. But to your point, bordering El Dorado and Placer County and having their schools open because they could, because of the color coding system, the parents just didn't get that. Well, how you open the schools? We can't. Of course you can. The schools right in El Dorado are open. And then since getting the schools reopened, even this past school year, it's kind of about reestablishing societal norms, things that you never thought you would have to take for granted, but just the concept of people acting in a polite manner is gone out the window, whether it's students with teachers, or even adults with adults. It's just like the concept of etiquette or how to have conversations with one another. I think people are still struggling after the pandemic of how to put that back together again. Which is amazing that, a year and a half can kind of like erode centuries, millennia of development as a humankind.
Something happened.
Yeah. It just kind of speaks how fragile our society is. I think things are getting better, but it's certainly not where we need it to be yet.
We're still trying to figure it out. I was talking to I was realizing our 8th grade promotees, this is, they came in, well, you came in 9th grade, your 9th grade year was interrupted, right? Yeah, you probably remember what that felt like. Were you happy at first? Because you were thinking, I got 2 weeks now, I'm going to be off? Yeah. But then, when did it switch? Because most students, it switched at some point and said, ooh, I want to be back. I think probably within a week or two. You really want to be back. Yeah. So the students' experience are there too. You probably at some point had the adjusted graduation credit conversation. Yeah, so never mind. I don't want to bring up any trauma. But I think we're still dealing with that because we want to, in my system, we're trying to give grace and understanding, and yet, there's a whole nother world you got to be prepared for too at the same time, and recognizing, well, how much grace might be too much. Those are difficult. One thing that I thought about saying too, I remember making a comment at a board member meeting. I said, I'm 100% convinced that 100% of the people won't be 100% satisfied. And that was the case with any decision you made, right, during the pandemic. I think toughest period of education. So just kudos for going through it. See, you two are coming. You don't have to worry about just the next pandemic. No, actually, hopefully, hopefully that won't. Okay, I know we're gonna have a lunch in a moment. We're gonna accelerate. We're gonna accelerate in a moment. You mentioned something about communication styles and all that. So we're not gonna do a survey about communication styles, although communication is involved. Okay, communication is involved. So we are gonna take a survey. I don't know, we might can get it in before lunch, is that okay? Okay, well, let's hop into it then. Let's at least get started. We might have to debrief after lunch, but let's do this one. So we're gonna move a little bit quicker through the next part. Okay, in the left side of your folder, you see something that's called Working Style Questionnaire. And I'm gonna tell you after you get it, don't look to the next page. You're not permitted to look to the next page. You have to go in order, okay? You have to go in order. Does everybody have the Working Style Questionnaire? Okay, so once again, you can't go to the next page. The direction you're gonna take this survey, and like it says here, there aren't any wrong or right answers. You're gonna all pass, so don't worry about all of that. Okay. No wrong or right answers. It's a diagnostic of your dominant working style. And you might ask, well, my dominant work style might change if I'm a parent versus a board member versus in my work environment, right? You're thinking of yourself as a member of this governance team, okay? So you're in the role you're in as a governance team member. Don't overthink your responses. And the trick here is you're going to put 1, 2, 3, 4 in each of these areas. So like if you look at question number 1, I should see a 1, 2, 3, 4 in some, it doesn't matter which order. You're going to answer, and remember the 1 is the response that best describes you. So 1 is the one that best describes you. So on question number 1, if you consider C, work in a team collaboratively with others, your working stuff, if that's your number 1, that should have a 1, and then fill out the rest of them, 2, 3, and 4. Okay? So everybody's going to complete the first page. Once again, there are 5 questions there, and I should see a 1, 2, 3, 4 here, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 2, 1, 3, 4 in each of those areas. So I'm going to be quiet. Do not go to the second page until told to do so. Just after you finish, just go ahead and finish. Okay. Oh, do I need to clarify anything? Anything could be clarified? Okay. Thanks for not moving ahead. Thank you. Home baked? I'm a dessert person. All right, so even if you're coming to a close on page 1, that's okay. What you're going to do on the back side of this sheet, there's an opportunity for you to record your answers. So it says working style scoring grid. And all you're doing is transposing your answers from the first one onto the scoring grid. So that's your first thing you're doing. You're going to record your answers here. So for question number 1, how did you score? For question number 2, and so forth. And then when you finish placing all your scores there, you're just going to add down. Add down and place the total down on this, the totals line. Okay? So just go ahead and do that. quick. I thought you said you taught social science.
I did.
Your math is
I'm
quick.
multifaceted.
All right, I know some people are still finishing up. That's okay. We're going to record your score and just kind of see what we look like comprehensively. But before we do that, before we record your score, remember the lowest score is your dominant working style according to this survey. And I have to stress, there are no absolutes here, right? Of course, a lot of things are situational, a lot of things. I tell people, like, when you're sitting in the board president seat, you might use a different working style than if you're not the board president. It's a different mindset entering into a meeting. I recognize that. So these aren't absolutes, and of course they're fluid, but it is something to think about. I wouldn't totally dismiss that. So we'll go ahead and do that. But before we record up here, I'm going to ask everybody, when you see those terms underneath, analytical, driver, amiable, expressive, and you look at your lowest score, just give me a thumbs up before you even report your score if you think that's your dominant, that fits, and you think it fits, or give me a thumbs up if you think it really fits.
Which one, the
Whichever your lowest score is,
Lowest
does that
score,
describe you? Okay, so some people are getting validation from the survey. Okay. Does somebody say, boy, this is way off? Anybody think that it's way off?
ask the same question for your highest score, though.
Your highest score is your least dominant style, the thing that's most unlike you. Does anybody think that fits also? Oh, you think that definitely fits you? And that doesn't fit you. Doesn't fit you, you think? Okay. What do you think, Rhea? It doesn't fit. The lowest score doesn't fit you. The highest one doesn't fit you. Okay. Well, the other part that we won't do, but in your mind, do this. As you look around the room, psychoanalyze the people you're sitting with and make a prediction about where you think who's the one in the room. Don't answer this, okay? But who's the one in the room that seems like the driver, if any? Don't look at them, whatever you do, right? Who seems like they're the most analytical of the group? Who are the analytics? Who are the expressives? Don't look at them, whatever you do. And then who are the amiables? So let's go ahead and record these scores and see what we got here. Kara, Kara, let's go you first. What are your scores? Just go straight down the line for me.
10, 20, 9,
10, 20, 20?
9, 11.
Said 20, yeah. Okay. Okay. Gotcha. Let's go. Jennifer, what you got?
Yep, 9, 7, 19, 6,
9, 7,
16.
16.
No, 19, 16.
Oh, 19
Yep,
and 16.
yep.
Oh, you're up there on the. Okay, gotcha. Tim, what you got?
12, 13, 14, 11.
You a Libra?
That's interesting.
When were you born? Just checking.
March.
Okay, just checking. Okay. Not that I'm making any connections here, but okay.
It's very balanced.
Yeah, this,
Actually, that's good for your profession.
oh, the therapist, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Let's go, Dr. Collegian? Collegian? 9? 11? 15 and 15. All right.
I'm pretty close to 10, 11, 14, 14, and 11.
11, 14, 14, and 11?
Yeah.
Rhea, what you got?
I have 9, 17, 9, 15.
9, 17, 9, another 9? 15. Oh, 9, 17, 9 and 15, okay. If you have to choose between these two, which one you think is your Lord? You think you're a nice person? Likes to get along with others, okay. If I ask your friends, would they say the same thing? I would hope so. Okay. One of my favorite interview questions is, to people, I ask them, if I go talk to your coworkers, what's the worst thing they'll say about you? It's interesting to see people process that.
8,
8,
11, 16, 15.
15. And you said that this one is incorrect.
Well, it's correct and incorrect at the same time. It's probably my my driver is influences the amiable. In other words, I'm a big solution finder, a problem solver, negotiator, compromiser. And I consider those as amiable characters because you're trying to get different people to come to a solution. But I'm probably doing it because I want to get something done. So maybe it is accurate. I don't know.
I love it, the psychoanalysis.
Yeah, as I think about it, maybe it is because maybe it's the driver that's yeah. I don't know.
Okay. Well, and some other, who else said that, well, actually, let's look at this too, before you don't go to the last page yet, but do look at the companion page, the one that says what each style brings to the table, and just read those descriptors. The analytics, that means thoroughness is one of the traits that they bring to the table, and then some words that describe the analytics are, breaks, they're always analyzing, so it's like, do I turn left or right? Where would that take me? What's the quicker route? And I'm constantly pumping the brakes. Protects from mistakes. Always worried about, what are the implications of the decisions that we're making, right? And then a wealth of data. Yeah. I think that falls on me. So when I ask people what's the worst thing they're going to say about me, they're going to say that he's slow to make decisions. And that's because I'm in that analytical space. I'm analyzing stuff. I tell people I want to be right at the end of the meeting, not at the start of the meeting, right? I'm analyzing everything. I want to hear the thoughts there. Who, let's see, had the lowest analytical scores? Let's see, that was here. Here was a low analytic. And Rhea, you think this is you, so I'm going to get you later, huh? So
And Jen had a 9 there too.
Oh, but the lowest was the 7.
The lowest 7.
Yeah,
Okay,
lowest was 7, yeah. So, Superintendent, do you think you think this is pretty good line for you?
I think so. I would say my analytic and driver are probably, I would think they're almost tied, but up there,
Mm-hmm.
higher.
And the superintendent too, when you think about this in the landscape of governance, the superintendent might be the same person, but their demeanor or approach might change as a member of the governance team. And the governance team member are the trustees and the superintendent, whereas the role of the superintendent working with staff might need to take on a different leadership style. And because you're working with multiple teams too, right? Sometimes you gotta You got to be the driver of the group, right? As a superintendent. It all depends on usually the group that you're working with. So, and president.
Yeah, spot on.
Analytics?
Yeah, yep, that's me.
That's you, clearly. That's no unapologetic. That's
Yeah,
me.
that's me.
Very clearly. Okay. And let's see who were did anybody have a lower score that was in the driver range? Oh, clearly. Yes. Jennifer, does that capture who you see? You're the driver?
Yep.
So you like action
Yep.
and you're focused, get focused, get the job done, very organized.
Yep.
You make lists in your sleep?
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
Insomnia is real.
Is the way that she's answering these questions indicative of being a driver?
I think there's further evidence, right? Keep timelines. When people miss timelines, does that drive you crazy?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Very disciplined, organized. Okay, gotcha. The driver. Did anybody have a driver? Okay, fess up. Did anybody predict that Jennifer is the driver? Okay, you saw it. You clearly saw it, huh? I won't ask you when the first time you recognized that, but don't answer that. Just gonna think about it. All right. Anybody had lower being the amiable? I'm gonna circle here with Kara, and I'm gonna circle Rhea. So amiables. Does that sound like you? Kara? Yeah. It does? Process oriented? Does that mean sometimes the process is more important than the outcome? How you get there is more important than where you go? Probably does, huh? Yeah. It's something to be, I remember one superintendent I used to talk to said in their particular district, as a superintendent, he had to be really comfortable with the outcome because to his board, the process was everything. The process was everything. And that's where he really had to live in that space and be okay with the different outcomes. That's difficult. But those 5 words on the right there, sensitivity, intention to process, inclusive, build consensus, inquiry skills. Does that say? You mentioned you asked a lot of questions though, huh? So none of these are absolutes, right? But it does kind of give some leanings. Do you ask a lot of questions? Inquiry? Or do you have a lot of questions that are in your mind?
Somebody who thinks of processes themselves, so, like, I'm not always one that immediately has something to say. But I ask a lot of questions in my mind before I'm able to, so sometimes it takes me a while to think through those questions. Like, I'm not always on the spot able to exactly articulate how I feel.
Which other group of these 4 might be like that as well?
I'd say D.
You think the expressives? I thought sometimes the analytics might be in that category sometimes too. You got a bunch of information and you're trying to analyze or connect the dots, and that sometimes takes time. Yeah, it just takes time sometimes, and just recognize that. Yeah, that's it. So those are, and then who leaned on the expressive side? Oh, well, Tim sort of, but he's kind of, and, Chris Clark.
Yep.
Which one do you consider you're more dominant of these 2?
The expressive, no doubt.
The expressive. Okay, so I'm going to just circle here. But is it close to the analytical?
Well, when you were talking about, sorry about that. Not really.
But you think expressive is you?
Without a doubt.
The hope creator, high creativity, humor, think outside of the box, and like to see the big picture. So all the detail stuff, are details more of an irritant? Or
For me.
They are. Okay, the big picture person, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that gives a sense of the working styles. Don't worry, I'll get a summary of all this for, I do a summary at the end of the workshop, and this is one of the ones included. The reason that this is important, though, is let's take us back to the big picture. I'm going big picture for the expressives
Thank
here.
you.
Okay. The big picture here, and Tim, by the way, you're expressive. Does that seem like you? Or, because you're so close, the balanced one, the most balanced one on the governance team, it feels like. Does this balance actually, does that sort of fit you?
I tend to, yes, this happens to me in a lot of these types of things.
It's the green light.
So, but I would say, I think expressive, that makes sense to me in across lots of contexts. I do think a lot about this. I think I'd score it differently in different environments.
You do?
This board is, I hope I'm more amiable than it being my lowest score, but that surprised me. But I think expressive made sense.
Like, the one that people say I most want to be like is an amiable usually. I'm like, why? People, it just sounds nice, I guess. But reality is, this is how you see yourself. I'm always curious about how others see you too, because those might, that might be another one. If you had to take the survey for other people, how might those results change? You could do a lot with this. You could do a cross match and see where the disconnects are. It could be an interesting activity that we're not going to do. But let me take you back to the bigger picture before we kind of bring this home. What we started out with today, we focused on giving you some reflection time, right? To get to know yourself, what led, even when, and I encourage this because some things that you get exposed to as a member of the governance team are things that you might not have thought deeply about before, right? So even when you're going back to the prior chart, hearing others and their experiences might influence what your thoughts are about a particular issue. And that's okay. It's actually encouraged. It's recognizing that I'm going to pause and recognize that my experience may not be the experience of others, right? Just pause. And when you hear the experience of others, you might say, oh, this is the way I got to be how I am. This is still who I am. It's not taken away there, but you just recognize that I have to think about it more of how I got to be there. It's actually a way of getting to know yourself. I compare it to how many people have gone to another country where a language is spoken other than yours? Okay. Do you share that helps you actually analyze the country or the place where you grew up in? In other words, you've taken yourself out of your normal environment, and that makes you go through a self-reflection process. You said family immigrated here, right? You have experience in the country where your parents were from originally? A little bit. Have you gone there? Yeah. Did that make you reflect on here? Yeah, yeah. And that's a similar experience? Anybody else? Which countries made you go through the most reflection?
Soviet Union.
Soviet Union made you reflect, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. What year did you go there?
1985.
It's funny. I was there probably in had to be around 94, 95.
I was there before Gorbachev even came to power.
Yeah. My parents always had us host people from parts of the world, and then we would go visit. And so I had a chance to go to Troysk and Moscow and St. Petersburg, and I was like, oh, okay, put me through a reflection period, right?
It was Leningrad when I was there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. What other countries had you go through some reflection?
European countries,
European.
Germany, France, Switzerland.
Yeah. Me too. I was like, man. I went from England to France to Germany, and I just remember navigating the subways or the train system, and I remember going from England where things were kind of orderly, France where things were all over the place with the subway, And then we got to Germany, it's like, when the doors opened for the subway, everybody was in a line and they kind of just queued up and came in and people lined and went out. I was like, oh, and I'm in my France mode, so I'm in my, it was like, oh, okay, this is different, right? Anybody else had another country experience? I call it the out of this world or out of this country experience?
Besides Europe, I've done a lot of European countries, but Costa Rica, which is ranked like the happiest people on the planet. And so I did a lot of kind of reflections while there of why and then versus here.
See, now that we're being recorded, you're gonna be on the commercial. Come to Costa Rica, the happiest place in the world. Yeah, I was sharing earlier that my family had a chance to live in Mexico for a year in Puebla, Mexico, and I had a chance, biggest mistake I made was going there for 2 months, and I came back because I wanted to pursue my teaching credential. I was like, I should have stayed the whole year, because then I would have been able to really speak Spanish rather than kind of nibble in Spanish, right? Yeah. But that's a huge, when you get to know yourself by taking yourself out of your normal circumstances. Try to bring that to you with the board. But then the other part we just did was sort of some interpersonal considerations. In other words, knowing yourself, this survey, sharing your stories, but then how it's gonna relate to others. So flip over the page on the last page here. This is the interpersonal part. How are you going to relate to others? So these are considerations. So let's make sure we're reading this right. Who's the analytic here? Raise your hand. So if I'm David, I'm the analytic, and I'm interacting with an amiable. Who's an amiable? So let's say if David's interacting with Rhea or Kara, the suggestion is, if I go straight down, start off on a personal note, because Kara, you mentioned that, right? It depends, communication style, how you're going to communicate to others. You got to know the other person because it might be the timing, the what you say, and all that. So the suggestion for David interacting with Kara would be start off on a personal note, gravitate to project specifics and expectations. Okay. Oh, gravitate to project specifics and expectations. Emphasize the greater good of the project. So, in other words, don't go in straight up with the project. This is what we're trying to accomplish. Go in with something personal. How's your family? Okay, stuff like that. Something, I was going to make a joke, but I'm not because I'm on mic. So I'll just say, start with something personal before you get to the project at hand. That would be the suggestion. Kara, so if David ever does that, just recognize that's what he's doing, okay? Who's a driver? Driver, Jennifer? So when you're interacting with a analytic, let's see. So if you're interacting with, who's an analytic? David. So if you're interacting with the superintendent or the board president here, do it with me. Breathe in for 4 seconds. Release. Take a deep breath. Relax. Slow down. With analytics, you need to demonstrate that you have considered all, okay, not all, but most, options or outcomes before moving ahead. Okay, so remember to breathe, and that's the big picture, right? You might have to force yourself to slow down. Conversely, if David's working with you, let's see what David might want to, so the analytics working with the driver, organize your work around major themes to prepare executive summaries. Jennifer would appreciate that. with headings and bullets that state the conclusion first and supporting data and the analysis second. Okay, so that's the suggestion. It's hard. And just think about it, all these relationships, it's almost impossible to do this, right? But might want to slow down when if you have something important to talk about, you might want to slow down and just take a look at this first. Where do we have, let's see, if we have David working, I'm picking on David, it's probably good because the board president, but if David's working with Sarah as the superintendent, the analytic, working with the analytic, yeah, can you read that for us? What are the suggestions?
A deadly combination. Run for your nearest driver. Establish timeframes for your work and stick to them.
Okay, the analytic, working with the analytic. Yes, yes. How about Chris is the expressive. So when you're working with Tim, Chris, what's the suggestion? And this is an expressive working with an expressive.
Oh, now that you have discovered the solution to world hunger, find someone who can actually make it happen. That's about right.
Let's put our action plan into place now, huh?
Right.
Yeah, get your driver, right. How about who are my amiables? Oh, so if Kara's working with Rhea, Rhea, what does it say? Because you're an amiable, and let's say you're working with Kara. So amiable working with amiable.
Laugh with each other about how important being warm and fuzzy is, then focus on what we really need to accomplish here, and then do it.
I love it. So laugh first, do that. And I have to say my favorite in this group is a driver working with the driver. Can somebody give voice to that one? A driver working with the driver? So Kara, think about this.
Get a car with a good set of brakes because you will need them. Before revving up and driving over a cliff, remind each other of your similarities and your need to adopt qualities of the other styles.
So watch out. When you got a driver working with driver, that car is moving very fast. Not sure where it might be going, but but be conscious about that, right? When you think about interacting with each other, how might this be useful? Or just throw it away. It doesn't have any use. Any thoughts? Before we, that's always a danger, say before we break for lunch, because then nobody says anything about thoughts. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think it's useful to a certain degree, but I suspect that many of us have multiple styles, maybe not all four. That's probably fairly rare. But we probably have at least two that each of us probably could identify with. So, I think knowing the person's primary style is good, but probably understanding their top two is even better.
Mm-hmm.
So I went through and all of us have analytical as either one or two. Every single one of us.
That's an interesting observation. Everybody has. Oh, except you. You do. Oh, you do. Analytic. Yeah, 10. Oh, yeah. It's an interesting observation. Everybody has analytical as the one or the two. What might that mean for the governance team?
Well, I mean, then if that's an interesting observation. If all of us have one or two as analytical, maybe we should be focusing on what our number two is, or what the other one is, because that's probably what will distinguish us more than if we're all analytical.
Yeah. I was thinking too, with that recognition, if like in Dr. Collegian's role, that could easily mean something in terms of communicating with staff when presentations. I think it might have some implications for staff and the presentation style.
I think it does, because I know often a lot of us are like, what's the data? What's the data? What's the data? And I think that there's not one person on this board that hasn't said, what's the data? And so I think that is helpful, because I think when we kind of all recognize that is the point where we can move forward once we have that data, I think it's good. I think also knowing other people's styles is when you're looking at these things and you're comparing the styles, you oftentimes need multiple styles in order to accomplish, you can't, if you look at a driver, that's like a terrible combo, right? So it's good to have multiple people with multiple styles, because that's how you actually do get things accomplished. So I think that we have to look at each of these things as a strength, that this is a person's strength, and then harness those talents and those tendencies to be able to move forward in a positive fashion.
Absolutely. Yeah, sometimes you have to operate outside of your comfort zone in order to get something done for the good of the organization. I apologize for the sports analogy again, but on the way up, I was listening to the Hoop Collective, Brian Windhorst, and they were talking about Lauren Marketing, who used to play for the Bulls. from Finland, plays for the Bulls, and now is with Utah. And with the Bulls, he was just a player that people thought underachieved. They just thought he was a high draft pick. They thought that he underachieved. And then he went to Utah, and all of a sudden he becomes an all-star. Right? He had this great summer playing for the Finland national basketball team. He got a new coach in Utah with a whole team that didn't have a star because they traded everybody. Remember that? They traded Mitchell and Gobert and all that. So Lauri Markkanen comes into this almost a blank slate. And the coaches said, well, we didn't have any preconceived notions of who's doing what. And so we just told him to do what you do. And he did what he did, and all of a sudden he was really good at doing what he did. But when he was with the Bulls, he had this role that he had to stick in, right? So when he got outside of that environment, kind of forced by context, he turned into a different role that was great for the organization. It was good for him and great for the organization. So sometimes people here might need to operate outside of their role. You mentioned if we tend to be moving too fast, driver, or if we're moving too slow as an analytic, someone might need to be operating outside of their role in order to get things done. Don't go here because it's not agendized, it's not agenda topic, but think about this in a context of a feasibility study. Okay. Hypothetically, okay, if something like that, what might that mean for current situations and processing very complex information and the leanings toward the analytic part? I just throw this out there as a consideration. I don't know the right answer. It's hard. It's hard. It's really complex to get there, and especially with the analytical part, there's so many implications associated with any decision that's made. Even the status quo has implications. That it's just hard. And not only just having one governing body, but then you add two more governing bodies, and then the outside governing bodies of school districts like Elk Grove and San Juan. That's a lot. That's just a lot. So all the analytical things that are happening within that, and then obviously there's a process to make a decision. But that's with every situation, huh? Cell phone situations, masking. It's just that one is huge. That's the reason most districts don't do it too often, right? There's so many implications. Obviously, we got Twin Rivers. It's Twin Rivers, right? Right down the street that went through most recently in this area. And that was how many years ago? Maybe 15? Gosh, it seemed like about 15 years ago Twin Rivers went through that thing.
It was pretty close to right when because I worked in Natomas, and I think it had just happened
Yeah.
prior to that, so
It was 10 to
that would have been
15
15
ago, huh?
years,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think so, yeah. Any other takeaways from this? Warnings, takeaways about the working style? Because this gets into the interpersonal relationships of considering how you're going to work together. When we come back after the break, we're going to take this next level of building a strong governance team, or creating and building or sustaining a strong governance team, which gets to how we're going to operate as a governance team. So we're going to look at the roles and responsibilities when we come back, okay? And I'm going to separate you into teams. But you need to get some substance. So how long do we normally take for a lunch? Or is it working lunch, or how's that working?
I'll ask the group, do you want to do working lunch?
You want to take a look?
Maybe 12:30, hopefully fine. Need to take a break.
Yeah.
Need to take a break. You've been going since 8:30?
Well, yeah, why don't we at least take to 12:30 and then reassess if we want to. All right.
Okay. So we get your stuff, and then people are going to try to be back here seated by 12:30?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. That's good. So a little thing.
Back from our lunch recess, we'll turn it back over to Dr. Camp.
All right, thank you. Thank you. All right, so as a reminder, in the morning we did some deepening work, light work, getting to know yourself individually, and then we took it out one layer and did the working styles and talked about interpersonal communication and personalities and working styles and how to work together. So we're about to transition now into working together as a team. The other ones, once again, are self and kind of one-on-one communications. but it does bleed into the team after that. And part of working together as a team is knowing clearly, as clear as you can, about the roles and responsibilities of the board and the superintendent and our core staff. So that's what we're going to spend some time on, just the roles and responsibilities. Fortunately, you have documents that already define those. And I would say too, even though the documents define, you have to figure out what the theory is, if you will, through those documents, and then you have to put it into practice. And I'll acknowledge up front, sometimes the lines get blurred. They just get blurred. But they are there. So at least when you're going into a blurry area, you'll recognize if you're going into the blurry area. You know, it's going to be reflected in your comments, and that's sometimes even helpful. Because everybody, I think the system works better if everybody sticks to their roles and responsibilities. Some people could argue that statement I just made, by the way, okay? Because our system produces what we produced, and we know we can do better. But I can just say, after working systems, there's a reason why they have those roles and responsibilities. You have those defined in your bylaws and your policies. So, and then also you give further clarity about how you're going to operate in your governance handbook. You have different protocols on like things like site visits, the way you're going to have a meeting, the way you're going to get an item on the agenda, you know, if you have information. Those are great documents, and it is, once again, those are the practices that award-winning governance teams have. They have in place. And I mentioned not everybody even has a handbook. So those are great. So we're going to take some time today just to process those documents. And just a little spoiler alert, that leads right into the self-evaluation too, okay? So let's do this. What you're going to do, and apologize to the people out there in remote land, but you won't be able to hear the conversations while the groups are forming and processing, but then when we report out, you'll get to hear that part, okay? So we're gonna form teams, only 2 teams that we're gonna form, and one team, I'd suggest you form your group in one side of the room, and another team go on the other side of the room. It can be at these tables too, wherever you gotta go, but we're gonna give you a time limit, and we're gonna have one team get assigned board policies 2000s. I think it's 2020, 2100, let me make sure. So one team will be assigned the 2000s, and then another team will be assigned board bylaws 9000s. So I'm gonna give you copies in just a moment. So what you're doing with those is you're processing them, so you want to take some time to read them individually, and then you want to highlight the meaning of those policies or bylaws in such a way that you're going to share it to the other group. So once again, we'll have one group that will become the experts in board bylaws, the 9000s, and we'll have one group that will become the experts in the 2000s. Right? Now, I know you might have processed some of this before because you had that special board meeting in January where you had the attorney and you dove into the Brown Act, but you also had a chance to review the handbook, and I saw there was an adoption of the handbook. I think it was in February. So there could be some crossover, particularly, but that's okay. You know, if everything's in line, that's even a better sign, right? So as you're processing and becoming the experts, you just might want to, have a thought about any circumstances in where things might have been blurred, after you're reading that. So here's how we're going to assign the groups. Go 1, 2, 1, 2. So you're, say 1. Just, one. Oh, 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay. So all the 1s are going to go somewhere over there. All the 2s are going to go somewhere over here. It can be at the table. You can bring the chairs around this way, either way. And the 1s, where I say the 1s are going? 1s are over here. The 1s are going to concentrate on the 9000s. The 1s are going to concentrate on the which ones? 9,000. And the twos then will concentrate on the 2,000s, right? So here are your bylaws and your board policies. So everybody should have a packet, once again. The top layer of the packet are the 9,000s, particularly 9,000s and 9,200. And then the second set are just the 2,000s and 2110s. Okay, 9,000s are group number 1, and 2,000s are group number 2. So when the group is ready to form, well, you can actually form now, and then take some individual time to review, and then bring the group together when it's time to have the group conversation. All right, you can move, and I'm gonna keep eating pizza. Oops. All right, since you need to be at the microphone, it's okay to. Oh, yeah, that would be great. Yeah, just pass that around. That's even better. Stay where you are. Perfect. Thank you. It's good with everything. It's like everything we say we needed. It's like it just pops up. So thank you. Thank you again. That's excellent. All right, so here's where we're going to become experts on roles and responsibilities of the board and of administration. So the 2000 group has agreed to go first. And take it away. What are the most essential parts, or what do we need to know about the 2000s? In other words, the administration concepts and roles, and the superintendent's responsibilities and duties.
All right, I can jump in here.
Oh, you need the mic, huh? Oh, let me.
That's all right. We can.
Another one.
It's like I want to use them. I'm a superstar.
That's right. Yeah.
Sing your summary.
All right. Well, the easiest way for us to wrap up the 2000s is essentially by saying that it's the role of the board to empower the superintendent and then trust the superintendent and the superintendent's administrative team to go and actually enforce the policies of the board as well as the day-to-day operations of the district. So we thought this one gives clarity to the board, to the superintendent, as well as to the public of whose roles who. We did mention, there's certainly with the public, there's not a lot of clarity around what we're supposed to do. I think people often think that we're full-time employees of the school district and we're making all the decisions and running day-to-day operations. So this makes it very clear. And I think, the two biggest words were empower and trust, so that the board lets the superintendent actually do her job.
Power and trust are the summary words too. Any additions? Any additions? You died?
Is it on? Okay. We also talked about our communication protocols that implemented right at the beginning, and how I think we sort of focused on these policies in that sense. So we were able to direct people to the appropriate place in terms of especially parent communication. So we sort of reflected on how that was a good move for our district to go into that, and that allows us to reference back to these board policies, but also that allowed more clarity.
Yeah, more clarity. You mentioned something earlier, the group mentioned something earlier about the public not really understanding the roles and responsibilities, and they don't need to. However, as a member of the governance team and staff needs to know them so you can redirect people as appropriate, and especially the governance team. Like you said, you're not running the day-to-day, and in some ways, when there's a school-related issue, I don't know if the superintendent might get a phone call, email, or something. They might go to staff, I imagine first, but people will call the superintendent because there's a fight that happened on the playground, right? So that's, once again, the public not really understanding this. There's an org chart and an organizational structure to it, right? And it's not because you're bad people or you don't care. is you've hired people to do certain things. And I think in Board Policy 2000, it clearly says it, near the bottom there, it says something about the superintendent may delegate to other staff any duties imposed on him or her. It doesn't relieve the superintendent of the responsibility, but you are hiring other people to do certain things, right? With all due respect to the almighty, Dr. Collegian's special too, good and all that, but she can't do it all. That's why she hires people, and she has people that hire people in order to do it all, right?
We also talked about, as a board, ensuring that, as group collective, we also trust the administrators that Dr. Collegian has hired to do certain jobs. So we talked about how that reflects on us as a board, in terms of trusting the different departments.
Yeah. Does that sometimes get difficult? It can? Yeah. You know, with the situation that it gets most difficult, I can think there are two where they're most difficult for trustees to remember that. One would be, and let me know if you agree or disagree, it's okay. One would be when you have a kid in the system. When your own personal kid's in the system, it makes it, you're really close to the situation there, right? And then the other would be if you have an interest in a particular area. So if you have an interest in, let's say, the mathematics course or a career technical education program, apprentice type program, it could be special education, you know, it could. So when you have a particular interest, I'm going to say it's a little bit harder to step back and say, oh gosh, my role as a trustee is a little bit different, right? Of having that interest, right? Any others to add? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that some of the biggest thing is just, I think from what we've experienced is that the public thinks that we have a lot more power than we actually do, from the day-to-day operations standpoint, you know, so emails that we get, and to Kara's point of us changing and communicating to the public really what our roles are, so that they understand that we're for policy and that we're not an operational body, has helped. And I think it's more helped put us all on the same page from when we communicate with parents, because parents will go to who they think might be the person that can get them what they want. And if we're all collectively on the same page on how we communicate with the superintendent, that kind of stops that scenario from happening. And I think it creates trust between the public and the superintendent too. And I think that's where we can kind of build that with them, so that they're understanding that there is processes and that this isn't just like whatever, and that a board member has got these like superhuman powers to be able to go in and fix every single problem that they have, you know. And it's not that we're not aware of them or we're not acknowledging them. It's our job to just get them to the superintendent who can actually get them to the right department that can solve the issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to help people navigate the system, right? Yeah. And recognizing too, you know, in that policy and judicial review part of Masters in Governance, yeah, you are the appeals body. You're the decision maker in terms of if something, you're the judicial review portion of the system. And that's a powerful position to be in, but it's also a position where there might be some information you don't want to know before it's time. Big situations happen with discipline, and you have to have the discipline to say, look, you don't want to tell me everything, because if something comes my way, student expulsion, then if I know too much, I have to recuse myself. I know too much at this point. You're making me be biased. And if people start stringing together those connections that might make you biased, that could be a reason for an appeal that could be overturned from a county board of education standpoint, if they think, you know, people can make that case. So it's kind of watching it, and it gives you an out though too, where you don't have to take things on. You can just say, hey, you don't want to tell me much. We have staff members. This is where you might want to tell to have their issues addressed. And if it ever gets to my level, you don't want to take me out of the vote because you came to me because you think I'm a sympathetic ear, right? So let me at least utilize that ear at the appropriate time. It'll never get to you usually. Most times they don't, because you got people to handle everything before it even gets to you, right? Thoughts? Yes.
I had a question, because there are some kids that, well, I used to work with.
Microphone too. There we go.
Okay. That I used to work with in Rancho Cordova that may have disciplinary issues that I've sat in on hearings and everything. So just for clarification, I mean, now my position has changed, but I still kind of know what's going on with that. I still have to recuse myself because I actually know the circumstances and everything, correct?
I'd say I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not giving legal advice. I'm just suggesting to be cautious and cautious of the reality of sometimes you might know too much, and then sometimes the perception that people, well, we see it playing out on the national scene right now. If people want to people want to have confidence in the system that people are going to get a fair shake at it when it gets to, a judicial body.
Right.
And because in our people are losing faith in the judicial system at so many different levels for the last few years. It's been a slow erosion. Well, that happens out locally too. Yeah, people want to have faith in their local school board that they're going to get a fair shot when it comes to things like, you mentioned student discipline. That's one.
Right.
Special education settlements. That I'm sure that happens on occasion, especially after COVID. What's the other one employee termination, separations, all those type of things. You might hear, imagine when there's a major thing that happened with an employee and it's going through a process and it comes to you, but yet everybody else has already come to you telling you what happened. Well, if people feel like they're not given a shot when it comes to you, that one, it could set you up for a legal appeal that, your decisions could be overturned, but then the public perception part too. So those are just things to be cautious of.
Okay, thank you.
No, thank you. Yeah. Very difficult role to be in. And I know in Masters of Governance, we talk about that. I'll get there when we get to the board part. Just stand by. Any other questions from the 2000 group? Once again, the concepts and roles of administration and the delegation part is critical. And then once again, the superintendent. And I see your practice is there's an evaluation process. In fact, you had a meeting, the earlier part of the meeting, right, was just evaluation. And everybody knows the board has how many employees? You got one. Yeah, you got one employee. One employee, that's the superintendent, and everything else, the superintendent hires. And obviously, the superintendent's relying on a lot of staff too to make a lot of hiring recommendations. And you almost have to, I won't say trust the process, but it is kind of trust the process, and you operate on the policy level. So your big thing is you want to make sure that policies are being followed that lead to the hiring decision. But critiquing the hiring decision, that's where sometimes it gets tricky, and it gets where that blurry line. I can just imagine, I got a lot of great sports here, for example, so people can be really passionate about all the sports, basketball, softball, football, and they clearly got an opinion. They have opinions about coaches, right? And yet there's a process. There's a process. Normally there's a school principal involved, an AD involved. I don't know. I don't know the hiring process, but those matter, right? And you got the Rialto rule too, in terms of what certificated staff are entitled to, if you will. Those situations get really tricky. I won't even get into all those other situations associated with athletics, but just recognize they are tricky. The other one that could be tricky is if you got a kid in a program or school and you've made your evaluation of that particular educator, but yet there's an official evaluation process, right? Those are just tricky. But thank you for summarizing. Give the group 2000 a hand in your quick summary. And now, you said that they had the more difficult assignment, huh? Okay, let them know, what are the most critical parts about the 9000s, and particularly the board bylaws? By the way, there are more bylaws than what I gave you, and a lot of times the answers to questions related to board are in those board bylaws. Things like late meetings. Well, I won't get into about this. Let's hear from the 9000s.
Yeah, I think this board is pretty astute on all the board bylaws because we had 5 of them, that came to the board and they've been coming to the board all year and we have a board policy subcommittee that reviews the policies before it goes for a first read and then goes back to a second read. But our focus was on 9,000 and 9,200. We tackled 9,200 first because it was a little easier to define that one. So I'll ask if anyone in the group would like to talk about the limits of board member authority.
So you said 9,200 first, the limits of board member authority. What are the highlights here?
It actually boils down to that the board's power is all 5 of them, of the members of the board, that individual board members have no authority. So our authority comes as a group. So that's essentially an overall summary of that bylaw 9200, other than it does mention that, the board's responsibility is not, individual board members is not to attempt to resolve issues or resolve complaints. For example, that needs to be referred to the superintendent, which is consistent with our handbook and our guidelines there. But that's essentially the gist of bylaw 9200.
Yeah, so the essential part you said, no, as an individual, and this is where the community gets confused too, right? As they see you as a problem solver individually, but that individually you don't have authority. The authority happens as a body, a collective, right? That's absolutely the case. But that is tricky, I have to admit. The other part, that just a warning within that concept, it's a warning that when you're interacting with staff, a thought or a suggestion might be interpreted as a direction from the receiving party, from staff. It gets tricky sometimes. So if you say, I think it'd be a good idea if we did this, well, somebody could be receiving that as the board members wants that, right? And you have no ill intent, right? You're not trying to break the rules or bylaws, but it's just people, especially us in education, who most people in education have had pretty decent experiences in the education space, and probably because we tend to follow rules and expectations and all that. So they want to be a pleaser. They want to please you. So just be careful about thoughts, suggestions, and opinions, especially when talking to staff, because it might be interpreted as directive. That's where it gets a little tricky.
One easy thing that I often do, One easy thing that I often do when someone wants to know what my thoughts are, I usually preference it by saying, well, I am only one of 5, and the group is that would make the decision, but my thoughts are X. But I always want to make clear to the recipient of who I'm talking with, I'm just one of 5.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one. Yeah, I would just add to that, another, I call it an outline, would be, I'm one of 5, or another thing that board members can say is, based on what I'm hearing right now, these are my thoughts, but I'm open to, and it goes along with one of these principles, right? I'm open to hear from others, and I have a right to change my opinion when I hear about the collective conversation, and that includes comments from the public on a particular subject. It gives you an out, basically, and where you don't have to hold your position. And I'm going to say, I'm going to editorialize a little bit. I consider it as a strength if somebody comes to the table thinking one way, and based on what they hear from people, including the fellow trustees, they change their opinion. And even verbalizing it, I think, is even more powerful, because for me, it's modeling what it's modeling what could be done not only here, but on the state and federal level, right? I'm willing to listen and change. You might get more jury duty summons if you do that, but never mind. But that's what they're looking for in jurors, right? People to come in there to hear the evidence and then make a decision based on the evidence. They don't want you to be biased before you get exposed to all the information. So I think it's a good practice, in other words. why get criticized for taking a long time to make decisions? I want to hear the information first, yep. All right, what more for the nines?
The more complicated, I guess, of the two standards is bylaw 9,000, role of the board. What's interesting there is, I'm often asked, what does a school board member do? And I always responded with 3 items. What's interesting is there's 6. So, my 3 that I always respond with is, we hire and oversee our employee and oversee the superintendent. We develop board policies, and we approve the budget. So those are the 3 that I always mention. But they also have here, and it's not that I didn't recognize it, I just never really thought of it as like one of the core, if you will. But another one is establishing academic expectations through the adoption of curriculum and instructional materials. The other one is providing safe, adequate facilities that support the district's instructional program. And finally, setting the parameters for negotiations with the unions. So there's 6. So I just have to add to it. And then, so that's the role of the board. But it goes on to how the board is supposed to support the superintendent and staff. So we need to make sure that we provide the resources for the superintendent and staff to do their job. And then a final one is accountability. And the best way to describe accountability is monitoring, which I thought was interesting because over here I heard trust, and over here we're seeing monitoring. So it's that the board's monitoring the superintendent, the board's monitoring the effectiveness of policies, the board's monitoring the student achievement, the board is monitoring the district finances, the board is monitoring the collective bargaining process, which that one I actually found most interesting because we don't sit in the collective bargaining. So it's kind of like, how exactly are we monitoring the collective bargaining? But anyway, that's a side thought. So that's what the focus of bylaw 9,000 is. And actually the second sentence, I noticed this right when we were wrapping up, I thought the second sentence was really interesting of the bylaw. And it says, the board shall ensure that the district is responsive to the values, beliefs, and priorities of the community.
Yep.
Which actually makes sense why hypothetically the LA Unified School District might have different priorities than perhaps Folsom. Folsom might have different priorities than Reading, or fill in the blank, because the board is supposed to be responsive to the values of their community, which sometimes does perhaps conflict with the state, who likes to tell us what we're supposed to be doing.
It's a struggle.
Yeah.
I'm going to say it's a struggle, and sometimes it's not clearly defined, especially in something that's at COVID, where the health officials in different counties are weighing in and these different metrics were being developed. That was difficult to say who's making the decision here, right? That's just it. And and we're not a state where everybody thinks alike. That's the thing, and particularly in this area, I mentioned it's a lot going on in this area, right? A lot of different thoughts and opinions. But in a way, that same concept it's another version of your current conversation about the Rancho Cordova area compared to the Folsom area, and how do you best serve these kids, and are our interests being met, or do we have sufficient voice? Those are all in there, but there is a part about the board representing the interests of each kid, and it's the reason that we don't have just one state board of education and they do everything for all the districts. It's a reason we have 1,000 different local educational agencies. I think 1,058, something like that. No, I'm off a little bit. 58 counties, which are their own local education agencies, and about 1,000 school districts. But that's the reason, because everybody wants their own local control, right? Everybody wants to have a say-so in picking their own elected officials to make community decisions. Yeah. So don't take that for granted, the power that's entrusted, hence trustees, on you. And yet, despite this enormous pattern, you're delegating a lot to staff, right? But you are clearly you're setting the direction, okay? You're setting directions, you're establishing the structure, you're providing a supportive environment, you're accountable, and that trust and monitoring is another concept. I don't have it on this slide, but in one of the slides in the booklet, you'll see a CSBA clock, if you will, and there's this wavy line in between. And on the fringes on the wavy lines, where it says administration's responsible here, and the board's here, and it clearly defines your role, on, I think around 9 o'clock, it says the staff provides progress reports, and the board monitors progress. That's where the connection is, and it's sometimes a wavy line. So it is, I'll say it, to paraphrase Ronald Reagan, it's the trust and verify thing going on. Got to trust them to do the job. You've hired people to do this, and then your way of verifying is through the progress reports. And that allows you to monitoring. And that's one of, accountability doesn't mean do this or else you're fired. That's one version, but I think just a strong one is we're going to monitor the situation. We're going to monitor the situation as a board. One part about setting direction is there's so many things in the school you can monitor. And I think I heard earlier when speaking to Don there that figuring out the data points that you're going to use to monitor progress and relying on quantitative data and qualitative data, those are current conversations. I think they're great. The thing is, it's hard to monitor everything, or you got isolated staff members to monitor things, but what comes to the board is something that the board has to decide. And whatever you decide to monitor, you've heard that term, right? What gets monitored gets done, or something like that. What's measured gets done. That's part of the strategic focus of the organization. It sends a greater level of importance, if you will, if you're monitoring it at that level constantly. But it's almost impossible to monitor everything from the board, right? It's you don't have that much time in a year. So just a consideration. But those are all great points. You said 6 though, and that sheet said 5. But was the 6th one, because then there were those sub ones underneath each one. Was the 6th hiring the superintendent?
No, well, the 6th for operational structure, for the role of the board is hiring the superintendent, overseeing the policies, academic expectations through adopting curriculum and instruction, budget, facilities, providing safe, adequate facilities, and then the parameters for negotiations.
Gotcha. Okay, that helps to clarify. I was like, okay.
Dr. Kemp, I also, when, I'm talking to my staff about board's role, my role, our role, we talk about the board bylaws and the board policies really being the umbrella that's the board's umbrella. Mm-hmm. And they're defining the what. Mm-hmm. And then once they define the what, and we do that collaboratively together, then we are charged with the implementation. And we see those in our administrative regulations of how we implement those policies. So it's the what and the how. And then I see that you put that graphic organizer up there.
You just, you just have taken that part. So this is another illustration that highlights, like you said, the 2000s and 9000s. In general, the board, the left side's determining the what you want to get done. And the staff, you have to trust to do the how. And obviously, don't dismiss the what. That's essential. Especially, I'm going to say the policies and the priorities of the organization. Some boards are all over the place. And if they're all over the place as a board, what message is that sending to the superintendent and to the organization? It's confusion, because you're saying that everything's a priority. And like I say in the setting directions course, if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. You're just scattered. It's like me on coffee. I'm all over the place. It really is disruptive for the organization. So it's a huge in my mind, is huge if the board's taken the time to have discussions about their beliefs. Another version of what we did today, the beliefs, the vision, the mission, the policies, and the priorities. Those are all, in my mind, could be special board workshops just to have those discussions. And especially like when you get a new board, it's, those are ideal times to have the conversations, to kind of reevaluate where are you coming into this picture, you know. So you're a new board member. You didn't adopt that mission and vision, but what do you think about it, right? When might be an opportunity to reevaluate it, to change it? Those are just great conversations to have. And then if I were to, and I'm critiquing me here because I know my organization would not be good at this. If I were to ask 5 board members, what are the priorities of our organization? We would not be consistent. And if that's not consistent, I know if I ask my principals, probably it's not consistent either. What are the 5 priorities of our organization? So that's my, my wish, really. If you ask 5 different principals in the organization, can they all articulate the top priorities? That's it. But you help with that because you can establish that. And then this is where it is, that green part, I mentioned progress monitoring and measuring progress. That's kind of the green. And you notice this is where it gets a little tricky. It's not in the admin side and it's not in the board side, right? It's right there in the middle of the Venn diagram. So that is actually kind of a collaborative type of thing. The strategic goals, you have a role in establishing the goals, the focus, and the staff should too, because the staff's working daily with looking and monitoring daily data. So what might a goal look like? And then, so what does success look like too? That's that green area. So that does take some time though, right? And that's a conversation, multiple discussions, right? That's it. So I'm glad you mentioned that. I put it in the trust and verify category. Trust that things are happening, but let's see the data along the way. Yeah. All right. Anybody want to add when you look at this Venn diagram? By the way, that other part, we talked about the board part, but notice the staff, the action plans, the implementation, that's got to be up to staff. The temptation, once again, like if Kara has advanced knowledge of the social studies curriculum and there's a book adoption process that's taking place, and she might have an opinion, and yet they've gone through this whole process that leads to the adoption of textbooks, especially secondary level. The staff that's part of the action plan to improve achievement in social studies. And the staff is coming up with this, they're bringing something to you, but you got an opinion, but it's gone through this process. It's almost like, okay, I got to resist I got to resist and say, I trust the process, the staff. I trust that this is going to, but that's don't take it lightly. There's plenty of communities across California and the nation right now, the conversation on books, right? And what goes in libraries and things like that, and social studies curriculum in particular. The thing that I encourage you to do is the process. Your policies, you have policies that speak to book adoptions and all that. Yeah, it's almost, you got to trust the process again. Then when the outcome comes to you, it can get messy once it comes to your level, and I realize that. And that's because people start confusing the roles and responsibilities, right? And you take your role seriously as a board member of the books that go into school. But it has gone through a process, and that's what makes it difficult. Anybody else want to add anything to that particular slide? I want to add just one more thing connected with this. You know, some of you have heard of Peter Senge, the systems thinker. I know he writes a lot of books too. Somebody just read that part. Out loud to everybody, sorry. Whoever has a mic. Oh, well, I should have.
Systems thinking is about stepping back and seeing patterns. By its very nature, systems thinking points out interdependencies and the need for collaboration.
Yeah, so this interdependencies, everything is connected, the system, and as a board, a member of the Board of Trustees, you almost have to elevate above the individual things that's happening and look for the patterns. Look for the patterns that are happening in the organization. So once again, it's another way of saying getting caught up in the details is not really the role of a board, but looking at patterns, that kind of sparks interest. The only other thing I want to mention is, let me see if I can get to it, this. We at CSBA often utilize and reference this book called The Governance Core. It's in your bag? It's in my car in the trunk too, with highlights and tabs and all that right there. It's a great book, in my humble opinion. Not just because I'm doing the CSBA, it's just helpful. It's written by Michael Fullen, who, you know, when you look at Zoom screens and you see books in the background, for him is books that he wrote in his background, right? Because he writes a book a week. So Michael Fullen and then Davis Campbell, who used to be the executive director of CSBA, they came up with this. It's one of the best resources for thinking about governance. And he highlights that essential characteristics of for a governance team is to develop this mindset. And he centers the book around this mindset, having a governance mindset. And these are the characteristics that he really uplifts. And putting it together with this conversation about roles and responsibility, there's a connection when you read it. The systems thinking is critical. As a board member, getting caught in the minutia is not very helpful. It's the systems thinking that you're thinking about, and just recognize all these systems are interrelated. They're interdependent, like Peter Senge says. Nothing is as simple as we make it out to be. It's about the system. And then the strategic focus, that gets right around priorities. Got to have priorities as an organization. The deep learning part, here it is. I mentioned you as an individual don't have the capacity to be a learner of everything that happens within the organization. But if you want to learn more about anything that happens with the organization, you can always have your special board meetings in order to do that. And then the staff, we got an injury? Okay. You remind me of, as I get older, what happens is, when you were younger, you used to do stuff, and if you get hurt, you could say, oh, yeah, I got hurt doing this. When you get older, it's like, I went to bed, I woke up, and I was hurt, right? You just don't know what happened, got a crick here, right? But this idea about deep learning, you can always have a study session focused on one particular subject that you want to go deeper into. Sometimes the staff won't like it, especially if you're calling too many special board meetings, but it is something that boards, it all depends on how far you want to go into any particular subject, right? If you just want to learn more because you want to learn more to help make a decision about a very complicated issue. You had it a couple days ago, the study session. We want to learn more about the process and all of that, right? But if you want to learn more about how that issue intersects with another issue, you can always learn, like the SELPA conversation, right? You can learn more about SELPAs. You said 130 of them across the state, and they all have, if you know one SELPA, you know one SELPA, right? It's kind of like the charter world, too. So you can always go deeper. And then the public manner. We kind of talked about this earlier. People are always watching you as a leader in the community, and especially with, I don't know, you have, 18 cameras here? So, no, I'm kidding. You have cameras here, so people are always watching. So this is what our youth are dealing with now that many of us didn't have to deal with when we were growing up. They didn't have the risk of being photographed every time they move or sneeze or do anything like that. That's something that all trustees just need to be aware of right now. We're in a different age, and people are always looking. And even when the cameras aren't on, people are always noticing what's the manner. How do you, sometimes it's not just about the decision, it's the process and the process leading to the decision. And people are looking at everything you do nowadays. I think it's one of the hardest things out there for our youth, right? It used to be if you got in a fight and you got beat up, you got in a fight and you got beat up. Now you could be photographed and tweeted and retweeted and all of that. So I don't know what the right answer is, and every community's got to figure out for themselves. Things like cell phones, you had a big conversation on cell phones. I don't know the right answers, and the right answer for Folsom might be different than someplace else. I mean, we're all different, and just to acknowledge that. So that's a book that I just like to uplift, and yeah, this could be my board, we did a book study on this, right? Just to have that. My gut is, too, the author, Davis Campbell, he kind of likes visiting. He's at this stage in life where being heard is the gift, right, sometimes. And he's right down the street. I think he operates out of UC Davis. He might even come and make a visit if asked upon, just to, hopefully no one looks, okay. Yeah. I just say that. All right, so that's that. Go ahead and return to the seat. Nice job. Give the 9,000 a hand. Yeah. The roles and responsibilities. That sounds like a Saturday afternoon hand. Okay. Okay. So let you know where we are. You kind of look at our roadmap for the day. We're right on track. We're getting to the second to last bullet there, the preview of the board self-evaluation, and then we'll do the evaluation. So the self-evaluation process, for those of you that have been through before, can you give me a quick summary of what you remember?
A lot of questions.
A lot of questions, right? And this setting it up for
If I remember
Karen and
correctly,
Jennifer.
Wasn't it like five, there's a scale of 1 through 5?
Yeah.
And so we all answered the same question separately. They compile it, and then they bring it back, and we don't know how each other answered, but we see the compilation of all the answers and how the spread. So there might be an answer that we all said it's a 5, meaning we all think that the board is strong on that element. But it may come back as a 2, which would seem to suggest that the board recognizes that we have a weakness that we need to work on.
Excellent. No, that's I think a great description. Anybody want to add to it of things that you remember? Nothing to add this time? That's okay.
I think it was just Chris and I. Yeah.
That was it, yeah. And I have to say again, these are promising practices that outstanding boards do. They assess themselves on a regular basis. You know, and that usually, some boards do it every year, some every other year. There's one board that I saw work through this that they do it every year, and they have this longitudinal data set right now for like 8-9 years. And they compare themselves now to before, and they just have some rich conversations because they're constantly analyzing themselves. And one board member said, hey, I sometimes wonder, are we doing this? Are we doing okay? Do we really need to keep doing this? And then the same board member said, maybe we're doing okay because we keep doing this. We're always analyzing ourselves. So this is the way the tool is set up. Approximately 6 weeks before the workshop where we discuss the results, you get a survey. And usually the CSBA consultant will work through Martha, Rochelle, and you get an email. You can complete it electronically. And your responses are set up where, like David mentioned, they're confidential. So nobody knows how each other answered unless you decide to share during the workshop. But as a CSBA consultant, we're looking for patterns. We're guiding the team through pattern recognition. And like you mentioned, we're looking for strengths. We're looking for areas where there's discrepancies. And clearly, if there's an area where multiple trustees are ranking it as a low item, we'll give that some time too. So 6 weeks in before, you'll have about 2 weeks to complete the survey. 2 weeks. So if you're thinking of doing a board workshop on the 9th of December, probably sometime in October, you get the survey. And then 2 weeks to complete it, confidential. We'll still conduct pre-interviews. It's amazing to see, just like this workshop, of which you were highly punctual, that I appreciate. We do that with all the workshops, just to touch bases too. So during the workshop, this is sort of the format. We discuss the meeting guidelines and give some tools for how to process. We give some time to reflect on what's an effective trustee and an effective governance team member. Those are some reflections. We kind of discussed a large portion of that today, though, too. And then we'll analyze, like David said, the results, the strengths and areas to address. And based on those, we'll set some goals, you'll set some goals and indicators before we close. That's it in a nutshell. That's the process. So this is what the tool does. Like it says there, it's an opportunity to strengthen and maintain the effectiveness, to look back and reflect, and then look at perception data. What it looks like, I'm just going to walk by you to kind of show you. It'll look like this. It'll be color-coded, where I think the green and the blue are areas that are ranking high. And you'll get a copy of this after everybody completes it. The yellows and the reds are, we started looking out for, because that shows that might need some areas to, to focus on. And there is separated into two parts. So the part one, you can see there are questions regarding the conditions of effective governance. So that's the frame. And then part two are pretty much taken from those 5 areas or roles and responsibilities of the board. That's the 5 major areas, okay? So that's the part 2. And then these are all areas in part 1 and 2 that you'll have a chance to assess the board. Which ones do you think, when you look at it comprehensively, statewide data, where people might have the most difficulty? Kind of curious. Statewide data? Yeah. There's no wrong answer. Take a guess. What are you thinking?
The board responsibility part.
Setting directions, okay.
Yeah.
And then obviously invariably you start thinking, well, which area do we consider strong, right? And which area do we, so some boards, it's the board meetings, right? People are in very different places the way the board meetings operate. Some trustees are really good about, they don't mind going to 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and some are like, gosh, past 10:30, it's bedtime, I gotta be out. So there's disagreement about how board meetings are run. With a lot of boards, though, the team culture part, that's my guess. And I said there's no right answer because I don't have the collective or aggregate data. But I'm gonna go back and ask CSBA, do we collect data on aggregate? That may be something we can learn from in terms of, the CSBA and the breakout sessions, right? So you can focus on any of these particular areas and let it be data informed then with some of the breakout sessions. So those are some of it. And then just some sample questions to think of. This is one of them that's under the board unity section. The board is focused on achievement for all students. That gets into focus on students, right? That part. That was one of the questions. Board members follow agreements on how they would act toward each other. That's a sample question for those that haven't seen it. And your ranking, like it says there, I think President Reed said, or you said, yeah, there are 5 parts, right? And the 5 parts will be, your choices will be almost always, often, less often, rarely, or not sure. The concern about doing it too early would be the 2 newest board members might have to check not sure too much, right? So that was a concern. And that's just out of not knowing, but it's a richer data set if obviously if every board member contributes more than not sure. The board reviews its governance agreements regularly. That's something to consider. Mm-hmm. Like the protocols, well, you did your handbook in January, right? In January, right? So what does regularly look like? It depends. I know my current board, we look at it annually, and it's still a work in progress, right? That's okay. I say relationships take time, and they aren't stagnant. You have to keep working at it. It's never over. It's never over, right? And then as soon as you think it's over, a new team member comes to the team, right? And you have to reevaluate again. So it's really never over. So that gives a summary. What questions might you have going into the board self-evaluation in the fall or in the fall? And then having the workshop in December? Any questions that may not have been answered related to the process? Or did anything I shared there and that match the experience that you had before? I think you did one in 2021, was it? 21. I know it's a different board. I'll probably talk to, what's it? You were there? I'll talk as we lead up to it. Obviously, we'll have the results from the 23 survey. There might be a place to compare the 23 to the 21, even though board members have changed during that time. But sometimes it might be good to just take a look back to, and seeing how things have changed or stayed the same. We'll see. Thoughts? Okay.
It's a great process.
All right, well, with that, from my standpoint, as I promised, we are going to be done by 2. I do ask you to fill out the pink sheet. I think it's on the right side. It's on the folder? Yeah, to complete the evaluation. It gives me feedback, and it helps me to improve, right? I got a tough ego. Like somebody said, you got a tough skin in this thing? I do have tough skin, so. So just, give your candid feedback. I use it as a tool for improvement. And in closing for me, I just say thanks again for the opportunity to share and to be a part of your world for the day. And thanks again for the opportunity. The one last thing while you're filling that out, I'll say is in your book, there's this, we call it the onion skin. Onion skin looks like this. This is essentially what we were doing, and that's what I was drawing up there. We focused on self, then we got into interpersonal relationships. Intra is the way the team's gonna relate to each other. And then it's the inner group, which means this group with other groups, like city councils and things like that, for example, hypothetically. And then all that with the overall organizational effectiveness. So these they kind of build on each other. And the stronger it is with the smaller unit, it actually contributes to the strength of the bigger unit. So thanks again for your investment in time, focusing on self, focusing on this team. It is very, very, very important to building a strong, effective governance team. And that I can't say thank you enough for the time you put in. Like I said, 4 meetings in 3 weeks. I'm like, wow. And for your commitment to public education. You don't have to do this. No one made you run. And you've decided to spend your energy, time, and talents in this way. And I just say, I can't thank you enough for doing that. Really important for our 6 million students. Yes.
On the second question, it says, how many years total have you served on one or more governance teams? You mean, like, if we were on the board of directors of a nonprofit, does that count? Or
Just thinking schools.
Just schools.
Yeah, because some people leave and come back.
Got it.
Yeah, thank you. Your tech people are wonderful, too. Get those messages on there. They unmute the mic.
All right, for the public's benefit, we were just filling out an evaluation of today's meeting. As we wrap up today's special board study session, obviously we want to thank Dr. Camp for coming to visit with us and go through these materials with us. Obviously this process between this meeting and the board self-evaluation, which will be taking place in October, and the results, which we'll be going through in December. Obviously the goal is to make a stronger board for the betterment of our district, for the betterment of our students and our teachers and the community. So thank you for anybody who watched us. And is there any final comments before we adjourn? All right. Then we will adjourn by unanimous consent unless there's any objections. Is there any objections? All All right, we're adjourned.